We are live. Hey now, let me, I'm in the process of getting things ready here. I should also play some music in the beginning, so it's not just completely quiet. So we'll do that. But welcome to another stream. We are live, both on YouTube and on Twitch. So let's see. We're going to start by getting the word out here that we're live. That's not correct. Here we are. I needed the link to the YouTube live since it's... If you wanted to go directly to it, you have to put in a little extra effort. Hello, Moogle. How's it going? Alright, let's go ahead and put the word out there. Alright, we're going to be reading The Two Towers, of course. Let me just get the word out like I said. There we go. Put that over here. Okay. Ah, that's better. Okay. Okay, now we're talking. All right. Welcome to another stream. We're going to be reading, analyzing The Two Towers. Let me just finish getting the word out. I was just getting all the chats lined up and everything. Where's my Discord? Oh, I somehow put it mostly off the screen. When you have two screens, you're not supposed to run into the problem where you have to put something mostly off the screen. It's just not a thing. You know, I'm a little hazy on where we left off. Let me grab the book and see if we could take a look here. Take a little look-see at The Two Towers and see if we could figure out where we left off. Let's see. We were kind of closing in on Helm's Deep, but we weren't quite there yet. Let's see. Oh, I guess, yeah. I think we had only done one chapter. Does that sound right? We only did the White Rider? It's kind of crazy because it's 19 pages long. Did we really spend 3 hours doing 19 pages? I guess that's kind of the point of the channel in a way. There's a lot to talk about because the White Rider is such a big chapter in terms of what happens and the ramifications of it. The return of Gandalf is absolutely huge. And I don't think we moved on to chapter 6 of book 3. Which is the King of the Golden Hall. Now, I'm going to go... And I think I said a few times last month, we're really only going to get through one chapter, you know? And for anybody that was used to me doing The Hobbit and how we would get through 3 or 4 chapters in a stream, you know, part of that is just that the Hobbit's such a light read compared to The Lord of the Rings. And I don't need to stop and explain things quite as often, mostly because there's a lot less to explain. There's a lot, and thankfully I'm logged into the correct YouTube account. So if I talk in chat for any reason, although I don't think I'll need to, I normally do that during the Council of Tolkien if I want to say something to somebody in chat and not talk over Sid or Matt. But I'll. You know, and I said last week when we were doing the council stream, hey, you know, I realize that I'm on the wrong account, so if you see NecroVMX in the chat, that's me. But then people came in after that, and I had to be like, no, I'm me. Last week's stream was really fun. Today's stream is going to be really fun. But let me just verify that we really only got through one chapter, that we only did the White Rider. Oh, wow, that's a loud ad. Okay, let's lower that. Speaking of things like that, YouTube has these new AI tools, and I'm not the biggest fan of that sort of thing, but it's actually really cool what you could do where you, if you upload something that incidentally has music in the background, like it happened to me a few times where I was going to raid somebody on Twitch and they were playing copyrighted music, and even with it being really low, I would say, let me not get copyrighted for this, or let me not get copyrighted for an ad, and a few times it has happened. But now you can strip out the copyrighted audio while leaving your voice, which is pretty cool. A lot more, and I would get in trouble because you can't do that with copyrighted works. No, and there's me talking about copyrighted. He is steering a straight course now for the halls of Theoden. Yeah. Okay, yeah, we really only did the one chapter. It's just a big chapter. That's what it really comes down to. It's just a really, really big chapter. So it's difficult to get through that while also analyzing the text, and while also explaining the lore in less than 3 hours. But that's what it's going to be, for especially as we get deeper and deeper into the Lord of the Rings. We're in the third book of 6. So if we think about it, and especially in the third book of 6, we're going to be going to the 6th chapter of 11. So we're really at what I would consider to be the half point of the entire thing, Not that all the books are the same length or even the same chapter count. I mean, book 4 only has 10 chapters as opposed to 11. But and we're going to read the appendices, of course. But when we, there's going to be a point where we're going to read the Silmarillion. Let's talk about that. So here is the Silmarillion. And the interesting thing about this is it looks like a really big book, which you can't really see because the sides are green, but it looks like a really big book. But really, it's only, 300 pages? 350 at the most? If I'm to go to the back of it here, it's a very long index. So obviously we don't need to read through the index. So let's see, that's still index. That's family trees. I'm just looking for the last page of actual... Yeah, it's less than 300 pages. So the last page of it, before we get to the tables, is page 292. I believe that's shorter than The Hobbit. Now, The Hobbit has big text, but I believe that's shorter than The Hobbit. Let me take out The Hobbit here and look. Yeah, it's a little shorter than The Hobbit. The Hobbit is over 300 pages. The Hobbit's 317 pages. So, but it's going to take a really long time to get through the Silmarillion because it's so densely packed and it's so fast-paced. The span of decades can happen in a paragraph, and there's thousands of characters, to keep track of, and then there's even some errors in it. Like, we're going to have to stop at one point and really just talk about the complicated matter of the parentage of Irene and Gil-galad, who, if you guys have been following along with The Lord of the Rings, has been mentioned a few times, mostly in book 1 when the hobbits were traveling with Aragorn. But yeah, it's going to be like that, Now, I don't know exactly what we're going to do once we're done with The Lord of the Rings. This is what's really interesting. I don't know exactly what we're going to do, because I could go straight from The Lord of the Rings over to Unfinished Tales, or I could go over to the Silmarillion. And there's arguments both ways. There really are. There's arguments both ways. The issue is, with Unfinished Tales at least, here's Unfinished Tales. If I open it, it's upside down. That's great. Okay, I must have put it in wrong. If we open up Unfinished Tales, the very first story in here is of Turin is coming to Gondolin, which is really a part of the fall of Gondolin. So I might decide to not read that and wait until we do the Fall of Gondolin, where it is included there as well, because the Fall of Gondolin includes all of the different versions of that story, including the one that's in Unfinished Tales. And then the second is Narnai Hin Hurin, which is Elvish, and it translates to the children of Hurin. But the problem is that when you read it in this form, in Unfinished Tales, you get the beginning of the story, and this is Tolkien's, in my opinion, his greatest story, The Children of Hurin. It's better than The Hobbit, it's better than The Lord of the Rings, it's better than The Silmarillion, it's just that good. And, what is going on over at YouTube? Hold on, this is acting strangely. Oh, I was scrolled off. Hey, Dizzy, and hey to Alice, how's it going? You'd love to hear me analyze one of the big... Okay, so, hey, Walter, what did you mean by the big three? So, are you talking about the Great Tales? So, here's the thing about reading it in this format. We would, it has the beginning of the tale and the end of the tale. Children is your very favorite. It is my very favorite as well. I love the Children of Hurin. So, it tells you at a certain point to stop here and read certain pages of the Silmarillion, and then come back and read the end of it. So I would probably, in an Unfinished Tales delving, not read The Children of Hurin. I would save it for us to read the entire story in this format. That's it. That's it. So I would want to read this version that has the whole thing. And like I said, the same with the Fall of Gondolin. So right there, we would be cutting out two major things. And then, description of the island of Numenor, we'd read that. Aldarion and Orendis, we would read. The Line of Elros, Kings of Numenor, we would read. The history of Galadriel and Celeborn, that's so important, we got to read that. The disaster of the Gladden Fields is necessary. Cirion and Eorl and the friendship of Gondor and Rohan is necessary. The quest of Erebor is necessary. Everything after this is the hunt for the ring, the battles of the fords of Isen, the Druidan, the Astari, and the Palantiri. A wizard is never late. No, Darrell, a wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to. So, basically, if I chose to do Unfinished Tales, I would be skipping the entire First Age section of the book, to be understood that we would read those parts later as a part of the Children of Hurin I already held up. But here's the Fall of Gondolin, which is also an absolutely fantastic book to have. So the question, though, becomes, do we jump into that Second Age and Third Age stuff after The Lord of the Rings, or do we read the Silmarillion first? I don't think it matters which order we go in. Now, but let me, and I want your opinion, everybody that's here, I want to hear your opinions on this, okay? Because like I said, it's a while yet. We're only halfway through The Lord of the Rings here. But when we do finish it, do you guys want to continue onwards to either Unfinished Tales or the Silmarillion? Or would you like to take a little break and read something maybe a little bit more fun, like we could go through the Tolkien Reader, which has a lot of great stories in it. I mean, including Farmer Giles of Ham and Leaf by Neagle, which is fabulous, and The Adventures of Tom Bombadil is in here, and that would be really cool. Oh, hey, Spielkopf, how's it going? Do a poll? Okay, we'll do a poll. We'll do a poll on the community tab, maybe when we're closer to the actual event. and you get essays in here like on fairy stories is really important for reading, Tolkien's thoughts. So that's a choice. Or if we don't want to go with something fun and lighthearted, we could go with one of his translations, like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, or Beowulf, or the Kalvalava. There's so many great options there that we could take a Legendarium break and dive into something a little different, just to give ourselves a break, and then come back and do those, or we could save those for a later time. Yeah. You defer to the Great Beard as to what's up. Well, let's say I really want your opinions. I think that the correct answer here was from Alice, who said do a poll. So I think sometime when we're, in book 6, or maybe in the throes of the appendixes, because it's going to take a while to get through those appendices, that we should, at that point in time, do a poll that would go live on the community tab, where everybody could sort of... I think you can put polls on the community tab. Let me test this theory before I go too crazy here. I've seen polls on YouTube. Let's see. Create post. Okay. How do I... Yeah, I can create a poll. I can create a poll easily. I could even make it an image poll. Okay. I could also do quizzes. Oh, I should be doing that, huh? I should be doing fun little quizzes for the community tab for you guys to answer. Would you guys enjoy that? Where in your YouTube feed you would occasionally see a multiple choice question from me? I haven't been taking advantage of that, and I think that would be a lot of fun. I think that would... I'm going to post one right now, actually. Let's post a little quiz. Okay. I'm going to post one right now. You guys don't have to take it right now, but I think that's a fun idea, and I never noticed it being an option before. J.R.R. Tolkien. Oh, no. Oh. That's awful. I love it. I have to end. All right, this is only going to be... I'm going to put 4 answers here. Okay. Why can't I post it now, though? Oh, I have to select which is correct. Okay, okay. Okay. Oh, okay. All right. I think I'll post these quizzes all the time. I could post one every day. I think that would keep people engaged for a channel that usually only has 1 to 2 videos up a week, right? I just posted it. So if anybody wants to look at it, it's there. And if you want to see. And it will tell me what percentage of people got this right. Now, in fairness, of course you could always look up the answer, right? But that's not as fun. You're not really testing yourself if you do that. So, yeah. Yeah, you know what's interesting is I will ask this question almost every stream. Hey, could we get somebody who's interested in being a moderator? And every time it's happened, there'll be 1 or 2 people that'll say, "Hey, I could do that." And then I'll say, "Okay," and I'll have them join Discord, and I'll DM them, and I'll just say, just be there at each stream on Thursdays, and all I need to do to add you as a moderator is I need a link to your YouTube page. And then something always happens, and it never happens, You missed the question. It's on the community page. I just posted a quiz, but you mean the question I'm talking about now is I'm looking for more than 1 moderator for the YouTube chat. Now on the Twitch side of things, I'm fine. I have plenty of moderators there. Moogle is always there. And then there's other moderators as well that come in. Maybe, yeah, I think I'll do that. Please remind me, Alice, to do that, because sometimes I forget to do this sort of things. But if you're interested in being a moderator on the YouTube chat, all you got to do, join the Discord and send me a message on there, and I'll talk to you about it. And if you're a good fit, it's not that big of a deal. All I need, I've gotten to the point with 2 separate people where I was like, this person's going to work out great. It's going to be great. And then they disappear, and I had one guy that said, some stuff, real life stuff came up. And I said, that's fine. That you can't control that. But please, when you're ready, give me a link to your YouTube so I could add you as a moderator. And then they don't. Yeah, and I understand that, if it's really, not a thing that you can do for time. But for anybody who is a regular, and whether you're here live right now watching me, or whether you're watching this on YouTube, I am looking for more moderators. Your reminder worked and you're here. Okay, that's great, Tommy. Let me ask you a question. What kind of phone do you have? I don't need the exact model. I'm just asking if you have an Android or an iPhone. Because I've been having issues with reminders on my Android ever since they changed the... And there's a Discord link for anybody who wants to be on there. Hey, Chewy, how's it going? Chewy, you're always here. Would you be interested in your channel member? Would you be interested in being a moderator? See, now, I'm afraid now if I ask Chewy and he says yes, then he's going to vanish and I'll lose Chewy. You have an iPhone 12. Okay. Then I guess you can't help me because I have a Samsung phone. And I've always had no issues talking into my phone and telling it to send me... oh, yeah, Chewy's always giving me the live long and prosper. Definitely a Star Trek fan. Oh, let me back up here. So I would say, hey, set a reminder. There's a little button on the side of the phone. It's like you to talk to the AI assistant. And I would say, set a reminder for this date at this time. And then it will say something like, got it. And it always worked. And then at some point, I don't know whether Google did it or whether Samsung did it. And I'm putting this out there for anyone who can help me with this. They changed the AI assistant. It's terrible now. And when I'll say set a reminder for, just as an example, September 5th. And I'll say what it is. Like say it's to meet with Sid, right? So remind me to meet with Sid September 5th, 7 p.m. We'll say that as an example. And it'll say, got it, I've set your reminder, right? And then what it'll do is over the next few days, it will randomly just set off the reminder and tell me to do that. And I'm like, no, I don't want you to remind me for the next 5 days that something's going to happen on September 5th. I need you to remind me on September 5th. So it had happened to me a few times, and I have to go into the app and manually set reminders now, which is fine, but you're always at work when these are happening. Really? But you're here though. I've seen you so many times here. Well, if you're interested in being a moderator, which is not a hard job, it would only be to occasionally post a Discord link if I request it, and if anybody is getting kind of crazy, you just kick them out of here. Well, first you'd maybe give them a warning and say, hey, cool it, and then maybe kick them out of here. It would be helpful to me, and it would be helpful to Alice, whose username is William Stone. What chapter are we starting on? We're starting on, listen to me. Book 3, chapter, I believe 6. Let me just double check for you. It's the King of the Golden Hall. Yep. Book 3, chapter 6, the King of the Golden Hall, which is 21 pages long, so hopefully we'll get through it. We have a lot to talk about here, but hopefully it's not as lore-dense as the White Rider was. We got only through the White Rider last time, which is 19 pages long. I think we'll get through maybe 2 chapters. Helm's Deep is not a very long chapter either. Oh, you work for Pepsi. Interesting. Okay. Okay, well, I'm just saying that you have been active in chat, and if you would be interested in being a moderator, it wouldn't take much more of your attention away. It's interesting that you make Pepsi. I no longer drink soda, but when I did, I did enjoy Pepsi. You got the quiz wrong. Okay, don't say what you got wrong, because you don't give it away for anyone else. I think I know what you might have done. Wow, a lot of people are getting it wrong. Wow. I know why. It's a little bit of I wouldn't say a trick question, but it's a tricky question. Because I know the name that people would jump to that's mentioned in The Lord of the Rings, but yeah. Yeah, a lot of people are getting it wrong. Wow. Pepsi Man. My brain has turned into Pepsi. I actually played that Pepsi Man game once. It was not very good. Yeah, but yeah, it looks like more people are getting it wrong than right. But I'm gonna do those quizzes more often. I might even do it like every day or every other day. We'll see. Whenever I think to. I think it's going to keep people engaged. I think it's going to be fun. That's the most important thing. No, you didn't miss the quiz, Adby. It's on the community tab. It'll be there. It's not. There's no time limit on it. If you look in your YouTube feed, you should see it. But it'll be there. Pepsi's not the correct answer. Oh, can I tell you something funny, Spielcup? So when I was about 17 years old was the first time I started, using the internet. And we had, this was, in the late 90s, we had AOL. Did I ever do a video on my opinion of the anime movie? I have not done that. But if you want to submit a question to me asking me what I thought of the War of the Rohirrim, which me and Alice watched together, and we had a blast, by the way, I would be happy to write a review for you. So anyway, what was I saying? Oh, I was okay, Spiel, because you work at Pepsi. So I learned something interesting. When I first had the internet, we had AOL, and I one of the first few internet friends that I made was a guy whose screen name at the time was Coca-Cola or something, right? Like it had Coca-Cola and then some numbers, right? I thought that was pretty funny. He didn't work for Coca-Cola. He was just some kid like me. He didn't work for Coca-Cola. He had no affiliation with it. Just a fan of their work, I guess you would say. He thought it was a cute screen name. And, you talk about whatever. I had the same username that I have today, which is NecroVMX. It comes from the Necromancer, the Sauron, and the Hobbit, which I chose that when I was the kid, and I'm still using it today, so you can tell I'm a big Tolkien fan, obviously. As if you didn't know from all of this. But anyway, I went to make a chat room once, and I was inviting him, and I thought it would be funny to invite him to a chat room called Pepsi World. And I found out on AOL at the time that you could name yourself after a brand, but you could not create a screen name, a chat room that was a brand. It kept failing. It told me I'm not allowed to create a chat room called Pepsi World. Yeah. You'll write it on YouTube? Yeah, YouTube or Quora. Either way, if you're going to write it on YouTube, make sure you do it on the mobile app, on the community tab thing. I found out that only works on mobile, which is a shame. It's beyond my control. I'd love if it worked on desktop, but it doesn't. I tried to get it to work on desktop, and I couldn't figure it out. Because I made that little video that I put in the new episodes where it shows how to answer it, and I was like, I can't find out where it is to make this little video, and I wound up connecting my phone to my computer and recording it like that, That's how that worked. I've learned so much about video editing and all this stuff just from doing this channel. But anyway, guys, I think it's time to get started. Let me kill the music here. And let's go ahead over here to the two towers. I have water. I have a little bit of water, but then I have a whole nother one sitting over there. So we will be moistened and everything. Okay, so Adby, it's if you're on the mobile app, when you're on my channel, there's a little button that says join the community, and that's where you'll see my posts, my community tab posts, but also you could make your own post there, and you could submit a question for a video that way. But it only works on the mobile app for some reason. I don't know why. That's a YouTube thing. I might write to YouTube and say, hey, could you get this to work on desktop? It's ridiculous that it doesn't. But, I don't know. They were the ones that told me to use this feature, and I think it's a very cool feature because it's a way for people who don't want to make a Quora account or can't figure Quora out to be able to ask questions to be featured in a video. But yeah, if you ask me what I thought of The War of the Rohirrim, I'd be happy to write a review for you, because I did enjoy it. I'll tell you that right now. I enjoyed it. There were a few tiny little issues that I had. Not lore issues so much. There was one part that I was like, oh, that doesn't work that way, But there we have it. I don't know why. It only works on mobile. So, yeah. Maybe it's a feature that they're still testing out. But, that's Chapter 7. I want Chapter 6. So, to recap here, we are in Book 3 of the Lord of the Rings, which is the first half of The Two Towers. And this follows... so far, it has pretty exclusively followed Pippin until we got to a certain chapter where it started following Aragorn. And, we'd followed Merry and Pippin going, escaping from the orcs and going into the forest and meeting with Treebeard and going to the Entmoot and all that stuff, and meeting Quickbeam, drinking the Ent Draught, and then with Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas chasing them down, they met the riders of Rohan, and Gandalf is back. That's the big thing. You thought it was a good fan fiction film of a legend. I mean, all of the films are fan fiction, to be honest, Time Lord guy, but yeah. Okay, you asked it in the community space? Cool. All right, yeah. I'd be happy to write up a review of The War of the Rohirrim because I thought it was pretty neat. I know it was an Ashcan film, but I don't hold that against it necessarily. I think they did a good job. The reason, if you don't know what an Ashcan film is, it's a film that is made either very quickly or very cheaply or both, and they do it to retain the rights to an IP. And the reason is because if they didn't make a new film based on The Lord of the Rings soon, the rights would then go back to the Tolkien estate, and then at that point, because these rights were sold in the 1960s, and, for something like $600,000. And if the film rights went up for sale today in 2025, it would be probably in the tens of billions of dollars. And then, of course, once you spend tens of billions of dollars on something, you are really under a lot of pressure to do something that's going to make a lot of money. And then you're not necessarily doing something extremely artistic at that point when you have to make back this, from this massive loss. So The War of the Rohirrim was made very quickly because the next film that they're going to make, which is the Gollum film, got delayed by a number of factors, and it wasn't going to be out in time. But they made something really cool anyway. I thought it was good. All right, so here we go. Let's go to Chapter 6, The King of the Golden Hall. They rode on through sunset and slow dusk and gathering night. When at last they halted and dismounted, even Aragorn was stiff and weary. Gandalf only allowed them a few hours' rest. Legolas and Gimli slept, and Aragorn lay flat, stretched upon his back. But Gandalf stood, leaning on his staff, gazing into the darkness east and west. All was silent, and there was no sign or sound of living thing. The night was barred with long clouds, fleeting on a chill wind when they arose again. Under the cold moon they went on once more, as swift as by the light of day. Hours passed, and still they rode on. Gimli nodded and would have fallen from his seat if Gandalf had not clutched and shaken him. Hasafel and Arod, weary but proud, followed their tireless leader, a grey shadow before them hardly to be seen. The miles went by. The waxing moon sank into the cloudy west. A bitter chill came into the air. Slowly in the east the dark faded to a cold grey. Red shafts of light leapt above the black walls of the Emyn Muil far away upon their left. Dawn came clear and bright. A wind swept across their path, rushing through the bent grasses. Suddenly Shadowfax stood still and neighed. Gandalf pointed ahead. "Look!" he cried, and they lifted their tired eyes. Before them stood the mountains of the south, white-tipped and streaked with black. The grasslands rolled against the hills that clustered at their feet, and flowed up into many valleys still dim and dark, untouched by the light of dawn, winding their way into the heart of the great mountains. Immediately before the travelers, the widest of these glens opened like a long gulf among the hills. Far inward they glimpsed a tumbled mountain mass with one tall peak. At the mouth of the vale there stood like a sentinel a lonely height. Above its feet there flowed, as a thread of silver, the stream that issued from the dale. Upon its brow they caught, still far away, a glint in the rising sun, a glimmer of gold. "Speak, Legolas," said Gandalf. "Tell us what you see there before us." Legolas gazed ahead, shading his eyes from the level shafts of the new-risen sun. "I see a white stream that comes down from the snows," he said. "Where it issues from the shadows of the vale, a green hill rises upon the east. A dike and mighty wall and thorny fence encircle it. Within there rises the roofs of houses, and in the midst, sat upon a green terrace, there stands aloft a great hall of men. And it seems to my eyes that it is thatched with gold. The light of it shines far over the land. Golden, too, are the posts of its doors. The men in bright mail stand, but all else within the courts are yet asleep." "Edoras, these courts are called," said Gandalf, "and Meduseld is that golden hall. There dwells Theoden, son of Thengel, king of the Mark of Rohan. We are come with the rising of the day. Now the road lies plain to see before us. But we must ride more warily, for war is abroad in the Rohirrim. The horse-lords do not sleep, even if it seems so from afar. Draw no weapon. Speak no haughty word, I counsel you all, until we are come before Theoden's seat." Okay. I'm going to pause here for two reasons. One is because I want to talk about some of this stuff. The other is because the chat started moving pretty quickly, and I want to read some of this. Let's see. You don't see it on mobile? Here, hold on, I'll show you. Let me... I need to go to a different scene to do this, but I'm going to show you what it looks like. It's possible that you... It's possible, but I don't think you're talking about the community tab, right? Let me bring it up here. I'm going to bring it up on my phone app here. Let me open up the YouTube app on my phone. And I think I need to go to a different scene. Oh, you got it? Okay, never mind. All right. Okay, cool. All right, then I don't have to show you. I'm looking at the quiz again. I'm going to refresh it just to see. Yeah, more people are getting it wrong than right. That's interesting. But, well, you guys will have fun with these sort of things. And hey, Brian, thank you very much. How could they make the film if it was not... Wait, how could they make the film? Was it not in the unfinished films like The Myth of Helm Hammerhand? I mean, you know, the story is pretty much the same as what was in the appendix, Time Lord Guy. They changed around a few things, obviously. They expanded upon it. The dialogue is, of course, mostly, you know, created for the film. But, you know, you could make anything. If you have those rights, you could make anything based on the Lord of the Rings, including the appendixes. So you could do a lot of different things, you know. Okay, so I don't want to talk too long about what we've read here so far, but let's just talk about a little bit of the linguistics here. So the land is called Rohan, but note that when he mentions Theoden, Unfinished Tales. No, that story, there is a big Rohan story in Unfinished Tales. It's about the origin of Rohan, but the Helm Hammerhand stuff is actually in the Lord of the Rings. It's in the appendix. You're probably thinking of Cirion and Eorl and the friendship of Gondor and Rohan. Okay, so just a little bit note on the linguistics. The land is called Rohan, but when he mentions Theoden, son of Thengel, king of the Mark of Rohan. Now I'm going to dip a little bit into Unfinished Tale stuff and give you a little bit, like a very brief history of the land known as Rohan. Now, this area, the Southlands, is the southern part of the realm of Elendil, Elendil being, of course, the first High King of the Dunedain in Middle-earth. And upon his death, it fractured into two lands. The northern part is called Arnor, which really just means Northland, and the southern part called Gondor, which basically means land of stone. And Gondor is really big, and it has a lot of different regions. And one of these regions was called Calanarthen. And Calanarthen wasn't very well populated in the Middle Third Age. And what happened was there was this race of Northmen called the Eothiad. They lived in the land that, is on the map. It's called Rovanion, which means wilder land. A lot of The Hobbit takes place in wilder land in Rovanion. That's where everything that's east of the Misty Mountains and north of Mordor is. That's where Lothlorien is. It's where Mirkwood Forest is. It's where Dale is. It's where Erebor is. So a lot of The Hobbit took place there. And that's where the Eothiad lived. And they were really friendly with Gondor, and they would often come to their aid. They would ride all the way down to the south just to fight in Gondor's army. And at one point, the steward of Gondor at that port was a guy named Cirion. And Cirion thought to himself, this is a really magnificent thing we have here, but let's capitalize on it. Let's do something more permanent. And he agreed to give them the land of Calanarthen. Now, they're not citizens of Gondor because he made it their own land that they could rule any way that they want. And the only thing he asked in return was essentially an eternal alliance, that if Rohan calls Gondor for aid, Gondor comes. If Gondor calls Rohan for aid, Rohan comes. Now, of course, like I said, it was called Calanarthen. But what the Eothiad called it was Riddermark, which means basically mark of the riders, because they were horsemen, they were cavalry, they were horse lords, and they started calling themselves the Rohirrim, which literally is horse lord. And what Rohan is actually the Sindarin name for it. So that's what Gondor calls it. It means horse country. So everything about it is horses. Which if you saw, like I said, if you saw the animated feature, The Ride of the Rohirrim, they paid great respect to how important horses are to their culture. They went south with a little help from Galadriel. That is very true. There was a point where a mist enveloped them, and they realized that Galadriel was helping them out a little bit. She thought it was very important that they make it to their destination. That's very true. And that was told in Unfinished Tales. That's a great story where we get the founding of Rohan. But yes, they don't actually call it Rohan in Rohan. They call it the Mark or Riddermark. Of course, when they're talking to people from other countries, they'll say Rohan because that's what other people understand. And that's important because it's sort of like if people from Italy, they don't call it Italy, they call it Italia. But if they're talking to somebody who speaks English, they'll say Italy. Also, Gondor is based off of Italy. Just thought I'd throw that out there. You like the people of Rohan? I do, and that's part of why I enjoy the movie, because it all the Rohan stuff in the Two Towers movie and everything, that was some of my very favorite parts of the Peter Jackson films, and to do something that focused on some of the lesser known Gondor and Rohan stuff was really cool. All right, let's continue onwards. The morning was bright and clear about them, and birds were singing when the travelers came to the stream. It ran down swiftly into the plain, and beyond the feet of the hills turned across their path in a wide bend, flowing away east to feed the Entwash, far off in its reed-choked beds. The land was green. In the wet meads and along the grassy borders of the stream grew many willow trees. Already in the southern land they were blushing red at their fingertips, feeling the approach of spring. Over the stream there was a ford between low banks, much trampled by the passage of horses. The travelers passed over and came upon a wide, rutted track leading towards the uplands. At the foot of the walled hill, the way ran under the shadow of many mounds, high and green. Upon their western sides the grass was white as with drifted snow. Small flowers sprang there like countless stars amid the turf. "Look," said Gandalf, "how fair are the bright eyes in the grass. Evermine they are called, Symbol Mine in the land of men, for they blossom in all the season of the year, and grow where dead men rest. Behold, we are come to the great barrows where the sires of Theoden sleep." 7 mounds upon the left, and 9 upon the right, said Aragorn. "Many long lives of men it is since the Golden Hall was built. 500 times have the red leaves fallen in Mirkwood in my home since then, said Legolas. And but a little while does that seem to us. But to the riders of the mark it seems so long ago, said Aragorn, that the raising of this house is but a memory of song, and the years before are lost in the mist of time. Now they call this land their home, their own, and their speech is sundered from their northern kin. Then he began to chant softly in a slow tongue unknown to the elf and dwarf, yet they listened, for there was a strong music in it. That, I guess, is the language of the Rohirrim, said Legolas, for it is like to this land itself, rich and rolling in part, and else hard and stern as the mountains. I cannot guess what it means, save that it is laden with the sadness of mortal men. It runs thus in the common speech, said Aragorn, as near as I can make it. Where now the horse and the rider? Where is the horn that was blowing? Where is the helm and the hauberk and the bright hair flowing? Where is the hand on the harp string and the red fire glowing? Where is the spring and the harvest and the tall corn growing? They have passed like rain on the mountains, like a wind in the meadow. The days have gone down in the west, behind the hills into shadow. Who shall gather the smoke of the dead wood burning, or behold the flowing years from the sea returning? Thus spoke a forgotten poet long ago in Rohan, recalling how tall and fair was Eorl the young, who rode down out of the north, and there were wings upon the feet of his steed, Feloroth, father of horses. So men still sing in the evening. So let me pause here. Oh, thank you, Georgette. What are you having for breakfast? Just as a curiosity. I always want to hear what people are eating. So let me talk about the flowers. This is really cool. So Gandalf mentions the flowers that are growing on the mounds. The mounds, of course, are the barrows, the burial of the kings, the previous kings of Rohan. And he said they are called Evermind, but more often called Symbol Mine. Symbol Mine. So let's do a little impromptu quiz here. Who here can tell me, not in The Lord of the Rings, but where else did Tolkien speak specifically about the Symbol Mine? What other book is this featured in? Or what other story, I should say? Yesterday's McDonald's? I won't judge you. But, look, I mean, you like what you like, you eat what you want. I always want to hear chocolate chip cookies time, nice. Does anybody know what older story Tolkien had written about, that had the Symbol Mine as a flower in it? Let's see if anybody knows while I just take a drink. I'm going to have to open my new water very soon, though. So my phone is vibrating. I should probably see what that's all about. That was just a Quora comment. Nobody wants to guess? Okay. All right. Let's see if I can grab that exact part. It's not Unfinished Tales now. Hold on. Let's see if I can grab that exact part. A moment here. Oh, I've gone too far. Flowers near the gates is correct, but it's not from Unfinished Tales. Well, actually, wait, hold on. I guess it is in Unfinished Tales, isn't it? It's in two places. I was looking for the name of the story, though. Okay, well, you got it. It's The Fall of Gondolin. It's The Fall of Gondolin, and because we were talking about it earlier, I kind of forgot, yeah, there is a version of that in Unfinished Tales. Yes, as Tuor came through the gates of Gondolin... Outercorn scolding the supposed Herbmaster. Well, I did say an earlier story. That's from later on. Now, if you guys just excuse me for a moment, because I just got these two comments on Quora, and one of these I want to reply to. Okay, sorry about that. So, Tuor first noticed these flowers growing when he came to Gondolin, and they are described both in that story and in this story, as it was just said. They're golden flowers, they're yellow flowers. And Gandalf specifically mentions that they grow where dead men rest, and what's interesting is the Fall of Gondolin actually seemed to be sort of the genesis of that idea. Because after, the actual titular Fall of Gondolin, they went through, the survivors, they went through the secret path, and they were escaping, and then one of the Balrogs attacked, and then Glorfindel gets into a battle with this Balrog, and he grapples with it, and then he takes out his dagger, and he stabs it in the abdomen, and the Balrog is going to fall down into the ravine dead, but he grabs Glorfindel by the hair, and they both fall in, and Glorfindel dies. And the Eagle Lord Thorondor, which is a name that, by the way, just literally means Eagle Lord, comes and goes down into the ravine and retrieves the body of Glorfindel, and he gets a burial and a grave, and it is said that yellow flowers grow on his grave, and that part of Beleriand remained untouched by evil until the actual fall of Beleriand, that no matter what was going on, with Morgoth and the orcs and everything that's going on, nobody went anywhere near Glorfindel's grave. It was like a holy place that they couldn't go near until, of course, the whole thing collapsed into the sea. So that was the first that we hear of the symbol Mene growing specifically where there are graves. And we know there are flowers out of Gondolin, which, of course, Gondolin was in its own grave at that point. I want to talk a bit about the flowers because I find it interesting. We're going to come back to the symbol Mana later, when we get to the whole part about the paths of the dead as well. With these words, the travelers passed the silent mounds. Following the winding way up the green shoulders of the hills, they came at last to the wide, wind-swept walls and the gates of Edoras. There sat many men in bright mail, who sprang at once to their feet and barred the way with spears. "Stay, strangers here unknown," they cried in the tongue of the Riddermark, demanding the names and errand of the strangers. Wonder was in their eyes, but little friendliness, and they looked darkly upon Gandalf. "Well, I do understand your speech," he answered in the same language. "Yet few strangers do.
Why, then, do you not speak in the common tongue, as is the custom in the West, if you wish to be answered?"
"It is the will of Theoden King that none should enter his gates, save those who know our tongue and are our friends," replied one of the guards. "None are welcome here in days of war but our own folk, and those that come from Mundburg in the land of Gondor. Who are you that comes heedless over the plain thus strangely clad, riding horses like to our own horses? Long have we kept guard here, and we have watched you from afar. Never have we seen other riders so strange, nor any horse more proud than is this one that bears you. He is one of the Edoras, unless our eyes are cheated by some spell. Say, are you a wizard, some spy from Saruman, or phantoms of his craft? Speak now and be swift." "We are no phantom," said Aragorn, "nor do your eyes cheat you, for indeed these are your own horses that we ride, and you knew well ere you asked, I guess. But seldom does thief ride home to the stable. Here are Hasafel and Arod, that Eomer the third Marshal of the Mark lent to us only 2 days ago. We bring them back now, even as we promised him. Has not Eomer then returned and given warning of our coming?" A troubled look came into the guard's eyes. "Of Eomer I have naught to say," he answered. "If what you tell me is truth, then doubtless Theoden will have heard of it. Maybe your coming was not wholly unlooked for. It is but 2 nights ago that Wormtongue came to us, and said that by the will of Theoden no stranger should pass those gates."
"Wormtongue," said Gandalf, looking sharply at the guard. "Say no more. My errand is not to Wormtongue, but to the Lord of the Mark himself. I am in haste. Will you not go, or send to say that we are come?"
His eyes glinted under his deep brows as he bent his gaze upon the man. "Yes, I will go," he answered slowly. "But what name shall I report, and what shall I say of you? Old and weary you seem now, and yet you are fell and grim beneath, I deem."
Well do you see and speak," said the wizard, "for I am Gandalf. I have returned. And behold, I too bring back a horse. Here is Shadowfax the Great, whom no other hand can tame. And here beside me is Aragorn, son of Arathorn, the heir of kings. And it is to Mundburg that he goes. Here also are Legolas the elf and Gimli the dwarf, our comrades. Go now and say to your master that we are at the gates, and would have speech with him, if he will permit us to come into his hall." So I just want to very briefly pause and just say Mundburg is what they call Minas Tirith in their language. And you can see that the language of the men of Rohan, which the fandom often refers to as Rohirric, which is completely inaccurate. It's something the fans made up. Tolkien called it Rohanese, is represented in the text as Old English. And I think that there's a very good reason that he uses Old English, which is really the language of the Anglo-Saxons, to represent the Rohanese language. And it's because it is the root of the common tongue of Westron that is commonly depicted as English in the work. So whenever you see these characters speaking English, they're almost always speaking a language called Westron, which Tolkien supposedly translated from to make these works. And of course, the Old English is how he represents the Rohanese, because it's a much older tongue and the root of that. And of course, Mundburg, you could see, Mund as in a big hill and Berg meaning castle. So castle on a hill, it's really simple. That's Minas Tirith. "Strange names you give indeed, but I will report them as you bid and learn my master's will," said the guard. "Wait here a little while, and I will bring you such an answer as seems good to him. Do not hope too much, these are dark days." He went swiftly away, leaving the strangers in the watchful keeping of his comrades. After some time he returned. "Follow me," he said. "Theoden gives you leave to enter, but any weapon that you bear, be it only a staff, you must leave it on the threshold. The door wardens will keep them." The dark gates were swung open. The travellers entered, walking in file behind their guide. They found a broad path paved with hewn stones, now winding upward, now climbing in short flights of well-laid steps. Many houses built of wood and many dark doors they passed. Beside the way, in a stone channel, a stream of clear water flowed, sparkling and chattering. At length they came to the crown of the hill. There stood a high platform above a green terrace, at the foot of which a bright spring gushed from a stone carved in the likeness of a horse's head. Beneath was a wide basin from which the water spilled and fed the falling stream. Up the green terrace went a stair of stone, high and broad, and on either side of the topmast step were stone-hewn seats. There sat other guards, with drawn swords laid upon their knees. Their golden hair was braided on their shoulders, the sun was blazoned upon their green shields, their long corslets were burnished bright, and when they rose taller they seemed... Let's try that again, I'm sorry. And when they rose, taller they seemed than mortal men. "There are the doors before you," said the guide. "I must return now to my duty at the gate. Farewell, and may the Lord of the Mark be gracious to you." He turned and went swiftly back down the road. The others climbed the long stair under the eyes of the tall watchman. Silent they stood now above, and spoke no word until Gandalf stepped out upon the paved terrace at the stair's head. Then suddenly with clear voices they spoke a courteous greeting in their own tongue. "Hail, comers from afar," they said, and they turned the hilts of their swords towards the travellers in token of peace. Green gems flashed in the sunlight. Then one of the guards stepped forward and spoke in the common speech. "I am the door ward of Theoden," he said. "Hama is my name. Here I must bid you lay aside your weapons before you enter." We're getting to that, yes. I did want to mention that if any of you are familiar with Beowulf, and I've said many times that Tolkien sneaks in bits of Beowulf into his work. The character of Beowulf essentially appears in The Hobbit as Beorn. Even the name Beorn is very similar to Beowulf, and it means exactly the same thing. And I'm going to give you the etymology here real quick. So Beowulf is derived from Beo, which it means man. But it has also been come to mean bees. And it is because in Old English, the way that you would pluralize a word is by adding an en to the end of it. So in the verb to be, as in to exist, and then you would pluralize, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The past is been. However, bein is bees, as in B plus en, bein. So it became a homophone, sort of. And so when you see beo, it's referring to bees, and it's referring to a man, as in somebody who exists, is in the state of being. And of course, when we're introduced to Beorn in The Hobbit, he's a beekeeper. It makes a lot of sense. Then we have the wolf part, Beowulf. Now, wolf, it's spelled with a U, but it still just basically means wolf. But it's metaphorical, it means hunter. Hunter of bees, or eater of bees, is the way that you get to bear. So, of course, when we are introduced to Beorn, he is a beekeeper, he is a man, and he is also a bear. He is essentially Beowulf. We also see the story of Beowulf as told a few times, actually. Once in a very satirical take in Farmer Giles of Ham, and once in a much darker and more Norse-inspired take with the children of Húrin. Now, the reason I bring all this up is because there is a character in Beowulf called Hrothgar, and Theoden is directly inspired by Hrothgar. So if you're familiar with the opening of Beowulf and the coming to Hrothgar's chambers, this is all very familiar. Let's continue here. Then Legolas gave into his hand his silver-hafted knife, his quiver, and his bow. "Keep these well," he said, "for they come from the Golden Wood, and the Lady of Lothlorien gave them to me." Wonder came into the man's eyes, and he laid the weapons hastily by the wall, as if he feared to handle them. "No man shall touch them, I promise you," he said. Aragorn stood a while hesitating. "It is not my will," he said, "to put aside my sword, or to deliver Anduril to the hand of any other man.
"It is the will of Theoden," said Hama. "It is not clear to me that the will of Theoden, son of Thengel, even though he be Lord of the Mark, should prevail over the will of Aragorn, son of Arathorn, Elendil's heir of Gondor. This is the house of Theoden, not of Aragorn, even were he king of Gondor in the seat of Denethor," said Hama, stepping swiftly before the doors and barring the way. His sword was now in his hand, and the point towards the strangers.
"This is idle talk," said Gandalf. "Needless is Theoden's demand, but it is useless to refuse. A king will have his way in his own hall, be it folly or wisdom."
"Truly," said Aragorn, "and I would do as the master of the house bade me, were this only a woodsman's cot, and I bore now any sword but Anduril." "Whatever its name may be," said Hama, "here you shall lay it, if you would not fight alone against all the men in Edoras."
"Not alone,"
said Gimli, fingering the blade of his axe, and looking darkly up at the guard, as if he were a young tree that Gimli had a mind to fell.
"Not alone." "Come, come," said Gandalf. "We are all friends here. Or should be, for the laughter of Mordor will be our only reward if we quarrel. My errand is pressing. Here at least is my sword, Goodman Hama, keep it well. Glamdring it is called, for the elves made it long ago. Now let me pass. Come, Aragorn."
So, I love this because Gandalf is still being the adult in the room. Gandalf is just stopping this quibbling before it starts, and he says, hey, if we all fight amongst each other, Sauron's going to laugh about it. He's going to have the last laugh. Aragorn here, who's nearly 90 years old at this point in his life, is just like, fine, I'll give you my sword. And I think it's very important that what happens here is that Gandalf tells him, this is my sword, this is Glamdring, the elves made it long ago. Because even somebody like Hama is going to know what Glamdring is. This is King Turgon's sword from the First Age. It's even more important than the sword that Aragorn is carrying in terms of, the overall history of Middle-earth. So he's saying, look, if I feel comfortable leaving the High King of the Noldor sword, Glamdring, then you should be able to leave Elendil's sword there, Slowly Aragorn unbuckled his belt, and himself set his sword upright against the wall. "Here I set it," he says, "but I command you not to touch it, nor permit any other to lay hand upon it. In this elvish sheath dwells the blade that was broken and has been made again. Telchar first wrought it in the deeps of time. Death shall come to any man that draws Elendil's sword, save Elendil's heir." The guard stepped back and looked with amazement on Aragorn. "It seems that you are come on the wings of song out of the forgotten days," he said. "It shall be, Lord, as you command."
"Well," said Gimli, "if it has Anduril to keep it company, my axe may stay here too, without a shame."
And he laid it on the floor.
"Now then, if all is as you wish, let us go and speak with your master."
The guard still hesitated. "Your staff," he said to Gandalf. "Forgive me, but that too must be left at the doors."
"Foolishness," said Gandalf. "Prudence is one thing, but discourtesy is another. I am old. If I may not lean on my stick as I go, then I will sit out here until it pleases Theoden to hobble out himself to speak with me."
Aragorn laughed. "Every man has something too dear to trust to another. But would you part an old man from his support? Come, will you not let us enter?" "The staff in the hand of a wizard may be more than a prop for age," said Hama. He looked hard at the ash staff on which Gandalf leaned. Yet in doubt a man of worth will trust to his own wisdom. I believe you are friends and folk worthy of honor, who have no evil purpose. You may go." Now, I love this because this is interesting. This is actually, I believe, and you guys can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on this, the only passage that tells you what type of wood Gandalf's staff is made out of. It's made of ash. That's really interesting. Now, of course, a lot of people miss this because there's sort of a fable, or I guess we could call it fanon. If you guys are familiar with the term fanon, it's a portmanteau, two words smushed together, a fan-made and canon. So something that we all just sort of accept because we like the idea that this staff was made from the boughs of a malern tree, because this is, of course, the staff that was given to him by Galadriel. However, we are told here that it is made of ash, and I like the idea of it being a malern-made staff, but that's just not the case. So Tolkien did sneak it in there that it is an ash staff. Fanendorf, oh my God, Alice, you are just too much for me sometimes. Just too much. Real quick, I just want to refresh the... I'm refreshing the poll. So I just want to let you guys know that out of this, not the poll, the quiz... the quiz question, I should say, just the question really, that I posted on the community tab. What was the name of Bard's son who became King of Dale after his death? So far, only 29% people have gotten it right. That's kind of wild. Only 29% of people have gotten it right. So if you know the answer and you want to help that number a bit, that's on the community tab. But I'm going to be posting questions like that more often. Where would Gandalf get his first staff in the story? He came over the sea with it. We know that for a fact because it was the words of Círdan the Mariner, who saw the wizards come over from the west, and he said that the gray messenger was leaned upon a staff. Now, he didn't mention the other staves. No, we have to assume they all had their staves at this point, because they are really important. They're marks of office, what Saruman referred to as the rods of the five wizards. It's just that special attention was brought to Gandalf because he wasn't holding it like a scepter. He was leaning on it like a walking stick because he, unlike the others, was old. And I know you would say, well, they're all old, right? Well, when they first arrived, they were adults, but they were not old. Gandalf was the only one that was old. He chose a body that was already very sort of withered for his own reasons, and it was wise for him to do so, and that's why he got the Ring of Power, and that's why he hasn't aged further. Now Saruman's sort of caught up with him in terms of physical aging, you know. You can set up a lot of them and have them scheduled to post. That could be fun. That'd be easy. But, you know, I mean, it's just like cool little trivia questions I can ask, and people can learn things from that too, you know? Yep, exactly. Saruman had raven hair. He was black-haired. And by the end of the Third Age, which we're in now, the only black hair that he has left is a little bit around his lips and his ears. Everything else has gone stark white. So we don't really get good descriptions of the other wizards. You know, they don't really tell you what Radagast looks like, and the other two wizards are not part of the story. But it is mentioned that Gandalf was the one that was old, and he had a staff with him. You feel like any staff from Valinor would be so much stronger than one from Lothlorien. That may be, but keep in mind that they were not here to be powers. They were here to be guides. And also that Lothlorien is the one place in Middle-earth that is like the Undying Lands. He came by ship. You thought he came via meteor? Well, see, here's the thing. The text that mentions that he came by ship is from a book that they don't have the rights to adapt. So, yeah, they couldn't do it exactly right, obviously, in the TV show. The meteor thing was a bit confusing to me, but I also I enjoyed it for what it was, you know. But, yeah. No, around his ears. Like the hair around his ears. I mean, he may have had black hair in his ears, but what I was referring to was the hair around his ears was still dark, and the hair around his lips was still dark. And if you look at the film version, you know, when Christopher Lee is all dressed up as, you know, Saruman, they did a very accurate job of portraying him exactly as he was described, hair-wise. Okay, let's continue. The guards now lifted the heavy bars of the doors and swung them slowly inwards, grumbling on their great hinges. The travelers entered. Inside it seemed dark and warm after the clear air upon the hill. The hall was long and wide and filled with shadows and half-lights. Mighty pillars upheld its lofty roof. but here and there bright sunbeams fell in glimmering shafts from the eastern windows, high under the deep eaves. Through the louver in the roof, above the thin wisps of issuing smoke, the sky showed pale and blue. As their eyes changed, the travelers perceived that the floor was paved with stones of many hues, branching runes and strange devices intertwined beneath their feet. They saw now that the pillars were richly carved, gleaming dully with gold and half-seen colors. Many woven cloths were hung upon the walls, and over their wide spaces marched figures of ancient legend, some dim with years, some darkling in the shade. But upon one form the sunlight fell, a young man upon a white horse. He was blowing a great horn, and his yellow hair was flying in the wind. The horse's head was lifted, and its nostrils were wide and red as it neighed, smelling battle afar. Foaming water, green and white, rushed and curled about its knees. "Behold, they are all the young," said Aragorn. Thus he rode out to the north for the battle of the field of Celebrant. Now the four companions went forward, past the clear wood fire burning upon the long hearth in the midst of the hall. Then they halted. At the far end of the house, beyond the hearth and facing north towards the doors, was a dais with 3 steps, and in the middle of the dais was a great gilded chair. Upon it sat a man so bent with age that he seemed almost a dwarf, but his white hair was long and thick and fell in great braids from beneath a thin golden circlet set upon his brow. In the center upon his forehead shone a single white diamond. His beard was laid like snow upon his knees, but his eyes still burned with a bright light, glinting as he gazed at the strangers. Behind his chair stood a woman clad in white. At his feet upon the steps sat a wizened figure of a man with a pale, wise face and heavy-lidded eyes. There was a silence. The old man did not move in his chair. At length, Gandalf spoke. "Hail, Theoden, son of Thengel! I have returned, for behold, the storm comes. And now all friends should gather together, lest each singly be destroyed." Slowly the old man rose to his feet, leaning heavily upon a short black staff with a handle of white bone. And now the stranger saw that, bent though he was still tall, and must in youth have been high and proud indeed. "I greet you," he said, "and maybe you look for welcome. But truth to tell, your welcome is doubtful here, Master Gandalf. You have ever been a herald of woe. Troubles follow you like crows, and ever oftener the worse. I will not deceive you. When I heard that Shadowfax had come back riderless, I rejoiced at the return of the horse, but still more at the lack of the rider. And when Eomer brought the tidings that you had gone at last to your long home, I did not mourn. But news from afar is seldom sooth. Here you are again, and with you comes evils worse than before, as might be expected. Why should I welcome you, Gandalf Stormcrow? Tell me that." Slowly he sat down again in his chair. What is that emote, Spielgab? It's cute. Reminds me of like the Dragon Quest slimes. "You speak justly, Lord," said the pale man sitting upon the steps of the dais. "It is not yet 5 days since the bitter tidings came that Theodred your son was slain upon the west marches, your right hand, second marshal of the Mark. In Eomer there is little trust. Few men would be left to guard your walls if he had been allowed to rule. And even now we learn from Gondor that the Dark Lord is stirring in the east. Such is the hour in which this wanderer chooses to return. Why, indeed, should we welcome you, Master Stormcrow? Lot spell, I name you. Ill news, and ill news is an ill guess, they say." He laughed grimly as he lifted his heavy lids for a moment and gazed on the strangers with dark eyes. A second here, sorry about that. "You are held wise, my friend Wormtongue, and are doubtless a great support to your master," answered Gandalf in a soft voice. "Yet in 2 ways may a man come with evil tidings. He may be a worker of evil, or he may be such as leaves well alone and comes only to bring aid in time of need." Wait, why did you... Oh, hold on. Oh, it's one of YouTube's default emotes? Okay. Oh, thank you, yeah. I do enjoy doing the voices.
That is so, said Wormtongue. But there is a third kind, pickers of bones. Meddlers in other men's sorrows, carrion fowl that grows fat on war. What aid have you ever brought, Stormcrow? And what aid do you bring now? It was aid from us that you sought last time you were here. Then my lord bade you to choose any horse that you would, and be gone, and to the wonder of all you took Shadowfax in your insolence. My lord was sorely grieved, yet to some it seemed that to speed you from the land the price was not too great. I guess that it is likely to turn out the same once more. You will seek aid rather than render it. Do you bring men? Do you bring horses, swords, spears? That I would call aid. That is our present need. But who are these that follow at your tail? 3 ragged wanderers in grey, and you yourself the most beggar-like of the 4.
The courtesy of your hall is somewhat lessened of late, Theoden, son of Thengel, said Gandalf. Has not the messenger from your gate reported the names of my companions? Seldom has any lord of Rohan received 3 such guests. Weapons they have laid at your doors that are worth many a mortal man, even the mightiest. Grey is their raiment, for the elves clad them, and thus they have passed through the shadow of great perils to your hall.
Then it is true, as Eomer reported, that you are in league with the sorceress of the Golden Wood, said Wormtongue. It is not to be wondered at. Webs of deceit were ever woven in Dwymadine.
So Dwymadine, let's talk about that just very briefly there. A little bit of Mr. Burns in it.
Yes, excellent.
Dwymadine is another Old English word, or at least an approximation of an Old English word. Dwymer refers to magic, and Dean refers to a valley, so it's just really the Valley of Magic. Gimli. Now, the next word is Gimli. Now, you know he's talking mess about Galadriel, so who's going to step forward? Of course it's Gimli, right? Gimli strode a pace forward, but felt suddenly the hand of Gandalf clutch him by the shoulder, and he halted, standing stiff as stone. In Dwymadine, in Lorien, seldom have walked the feet of men. Few mortal eyes have seen the light that lies there ever long and bright. Galadriel, Galadriel, clear as the water of your well, white as the star in your white hand, unmarred, unstained, its leaf and land, and Dwymadine in Lorien, more fair than the thoughts of mortal men. Thus Gandalf softly sang, and then suddenly he changed. Casting his tattered cloak aside, he stood up and leaned no longer on his staff, and he spoke in a clear, cold voice. The wise speak only of what they know, Grima, son of Galmud. A witless worm you have become. Therefore be silent and keep your forked tongue behind your teeth. I have not passed through fire and death to go bandy crooked words with a serving man till the lightning falls. He raised his staff. There was a roll of thunder. The sunlight was blotted out from the eastern windows. The whole hall came suddenly dark as night. The fire faded to sullen embers. Only Gandalf could be seen, standing white and tall before the blackened hearth. In the gloom they heard the hiss of Wormtongue's voice. "Did I not counsel you, Lord, to forbid his staff? That fool Hammer has betrayed us." There was a flash, as if lightning had cloven the roof. Then all was silent. Wormtongue sprawled on his face. "Now, Theoden, son of Thengel, will you hearken to me?" said Gandalf. "Do you ask for help?" He lifted his staff and pointed at a high window. There the darkness seemed to clear, and through the opening could be seen high and far a patch of shining sky. Not all is dark. Take courage, Lord of the Mark, for better help you will not find. No counsel have I to give to those that despair, yet counsel I could give, and words I could speak to you. Will you hear them? They are not for all ears. I bid you come out before your doors and look abroad. Too long have you sat in shadows and trusted to twisted tales and crooked promptings. Slowly, Theoden left his chair. A faint light grew in the hall again. The woman hastened to the king's side, taking his arm, and with faltering steps the old man came down from the dais and paced softly through the hall. Wormtongue remained lying on the floor.
They came to the doors, and Gandalf knocked. "Open!" he cried. "The Lord of the Mark comes forth." The doors rolled back, and a keen air came whistling in. A wind was blowing on the hill. "Send your guards down to the stairs' foot," said Gandalf, "and you, lady, leave him a while with me. I will care for him." "Go, Eowyn, sister-daughter," said the old king. "The time for fear is past." The woman turned and went slowly into the house. As she passed the door, she turned and looked back. Grave and thoughtful was her glance, as she looked on the king with cool pity in her eyes. Very fair was her face, and her long hair was like a river of gold. Slender and tall she was in her white robe, girt with silver, but strong she seemed, and stern as steel, a daughter of kings. Thus Aragorn, for the first time, in the full light of day, beheld Eowyn, Lady of Rohan, and thought her fair and cold, like a morning of pale spring that has not yet come to womanhood. And she is now suddenly aware of him, tall heir of kings, wise, with many winters, grey-cloaked, hiding a power that yet she felt. For a moment still as stone she stood, then turning swiftly, she was gone. Okay, let's talk about a lot of this. Do we know what Grima did before he was involved with Saruman? He was a man of Rohan. He was somebody that was very trusted. He was the king's advisor. You would say like a chancellor, that sort of thing. Obviously, he was seduced by Saruman, and they actually talk about it a little bit in Unfinished Tales. They sent him to give a message to Saruman, and then Saruman sort of ensnared him. He was in the Smeagol fan club. Nice. So Wormtongue's not a name. His name is Grima. Grima, son of Galmon. Wormtongue is a nickname, and if we think about it, it sounds kind of nasty and gross, but you have to keep in mind that we're in a culture here, Rohan, that uses a lot of the old English linguistic traditions. And thus, by worm, they really mean dragon. So they're really saying that he has the tongue of a dragon. It's sort of like someone saying that they have a silver tongue, they have the gift of gab. He is very good at convincing people. He has a lot of charisma to him, and that's why Saruman was so interested in him. So Wormtongue is really just more of a title than anything. More like a willing nickname? I don't know the answer to that, because he never really reacts in any sort of way to being called Wormtongue. He doesn't seem to like it. He doesn't seem to dislike it. We're never really told what his feelings on that are. So there you have that. Now I wanted to talk about this last paragraph that I read. This is definitely a holdover from an older draft. And when Tolkien finally published The Lord of the Rings, and it took him 20 years to write this, because he started writing it really just as soon as the Hobbit was finished. And before the Hobbit was even published, he was writing the sequel, The Lord of the Rings. And it went through so many different variations. And this, I'm going to read this paragraph again for you guys. I want to read this again. I really want to highlight this one paragraph. The woman turned and went slowly into the house. As she passed the door, she turned and looked back. Grave and thoughtful was her glance, and she looked on the king with cool pity in her eyes. Very fair was her face, and her long hair was like a river of gold. Slender and tall she was in her white robe girt with silver, but strong she seemed, and stern as steel, daughter of kings. Thus Aragorn, for the first time in the full light of day, beheld Eowyn, Lady of Rohan, and thought her fair and cold, like a morning of pale spring that has not yet come to womanhood. And she now was suddenly aware of him, tall heir of kings, wise, with many winters, grey-cloaked, hiding a power that yet she felt. For a moment still as stone she stood, then turning swiftly she was gone. Yes, you can use worm in a pejorative way, absolutely. But he didn't say Wormtongue. He called him, Wormtongue earlier. There's a lot of different meanings. But when you call somebody Wormtongue and they're very charismatic, worms are not charismatic, right? Dragons are charismatic. We already saw that with Smaug.
So this is definitely a holdover from an older draft. And Tolkien said about The Lord of the Rings that his main issue with it was that it felt like it was rushed. And it took him 20 years to make it, and he said it was rushed. That's Tolkien in a nutshell. And that it was unfinished, that it was not long enough, that there was not enough detail. He would have liked to have spent more time on it. And of course, if he was allowed to spend all the time that he wanted on it, he never, ever would have published it. C.S. Lewis once said that the only reason that The Lord of the Rings was ever published was through great midwifery. They're basically saying that this is a painful birth that had to be delivered by the likes of, well, C.S. Lewis, for example. Now, what's interesting here is we're told, this is like and this is the first time he saw her. And it's interesting because like the focus of the scene is very much Gandalf and Theoden. And then we're suddenly told this is the first time that Aragorn saw Eowyn, and Eowyn saw Aragorn, and he thinks she's hot, and she thinks he's hot. Believe it or not, originally they were going to get married. That was the original plan. This was the first moment, the romantic connection that was going to lead to an eventual marriage, and that she would become, the Queen of Rohan later on. A lot about Eowyn changed over the various drafts. One of the biggest things is that this version of Eowyn is actually a composite character. There were two different characters, one which was named Eowyn, who was the king's niece, and there was also the king's daughter, who was named, I believe, Indis. And Tolkien decided at some point that Indis was sort of a superfluous character. She wasn't really needed. So what he did was he gave her personality traits to Eowyn and just combined them into one character. She was always, from the beginning, intended to be the future wife of Aragorn. And then Tolkien started thinking about this. Oh, that's not the right one. Hold on, let's get this right. Tolkien started thinking about this story here. Beren and Luthien. It's one of his oldest tales. He started writing it in 1917 when it was called The Lay of Luthien. This is before even The Hobbit. It was before The Children of Húrin. It was one of his first two stories that he was writing, in this world. And he decided at one point that Aragorn is a Third Age analog for Beren. And so he needed a Luthien. And this is why Arwen is not really a very fleshed out character. Because she was added very late in the writing. She was sort of shoehorned in. Now, there's a great romance that he wrote. It's in the appendix. It's not part of the main text, the tale of Aragorn and Arwen. So here, knowing the story and knowing the tale of Aragorn and Arwen and knowing that he's been dating her for 60 years at this point, this paragraph seems a little awkward. Because it really seems like it's setting up a romance that's just, we know is not going to happen. So this is one of the things that I think if he had had all the time in the world, he would have rewrote that part. Let us continue.
Now, Lord, said Gandalf, look out upon your land. Breathe the free air again. From the porch upon the top of the high terrace they could see beyond the stream the green fields of Rohan fading into distant grey. Curtains of wind-blown rain were slanting down. The sky above and to the west was still dark with thunder, and lightning far away flickered among the tops of hidden hills. But the wind had shifted to the north, and already the storm that had come out of the east was receding, rolling away southward to the sea. Suddenly, through a rent in the clouds behind a shaft of sun stabbed down, the falling showers gleamed like silver, and far away the river glittered like a shimmering glass. It is not so dark here, said Theoden. No, said Gandalf. Nor does age lie so heavily on your shoulders as some would have you think. Cast aside your prop.
From the king's hand the black staff fell clattering on the stones. He drew himself up slowly as a man that is stiff from long bending over some dull toil. Now tall and straight he stood, and his eyes were blue as he looked into the opening sky. "Dark have been my dreams of late," he said, "but I feel as one new awakened. I would now that you had come before, Gandalf, for I fear already that you have come too late, only to see the last days of my house. Not long now shall stand the high hall which Brago son of Eorl built. Fire shall devour the high seat. What is to be done?"
"Much," said Gandalf. "But first send for Éomer. Do I not guess rightly that you hold him prisoner by the counsel of Grima, of him that all save you the name the Wormtongue?"
"It is true," said Theoden. "He had rebelled against my commands and threatened death to Grima in my hall."
"A man may love you, and not love Wormtongue or his counsels," said Gandalf.
"That may be. I will do as you ask. Call Hama to me. Since he proved untrusty as a door-ward, let him become an errand-runner." "The guilty shall bring the guilty to judgment," said Theoden, and his voice was grim, yet he looked at Gandalf and smiled as he did. So many lines of care were smoothed away and did not return. When Hama had been summoned and had gone, Gandalf led Theoden to a stone seat, and then sat himself before the king upon the topmost stair. Aragorn and his companions stood near by.
"There is no time to tell all that you should hear," said Gandalf. "Yet if my hope is not cheated, a time will come ere long when I can speak more fully. Behold, you are come into a peril greater even than the wit of Wormtongue could weave into your dreams. But see, you dream no longer, you live. Gondor and Rohan do not stand alone. The enemy is strong beyond our reckoning. Yet we have a hope at which he is not guessed."
Quickly now Gandalf spoke. His voice was low and secret, and none save the king heard what he said. But ever as he spoke the light shone brighter in Theoden's eye. And at the last he rose from his seat into his full height, and Gandalf beside him, and together they looked out from the high place towards the east.
"Verily," said Gandalf, now in a loud voice, keen and clear, "that way lies hope. Where sits our greatest fear, doom hangs still on a thread. Yet hope there is still, for if we can but stand unconquered for a little while."
The others too now turned their eyes eastward. Over the sundering leagues of land far away they gazed to the edge of sight, and hope and fear bore their thoughts still on, beyond dark mountains to the land of shadow. Where now was the ring-bearer? How thin indeed was the thread upon which doom still hung! It seemed to Legolas, as he strained his far-seeing eyes, that he caught a glint of white. Far away, perchance, the sun twinkled on a pinnacle of the Tower of Guard. And further still, endlessly remote and yet a present threat, there was a tiny tongue of flame. So just to point out that, Legolas is looking out to the east, and he sees a tiny flicker of flame, which is sort of suggesting that he may actually be seeing the Eye of Sauron from this distance, because that's how the Eye of Sauron is really described, just a flicker of flame. And the other thing is he mentions the Tower of Guard. That is the literal translation of Minas Tirith, which, I mentioned this. We got into a minor disagreement in the Twitch chat last week when we were having the Council of Tolkien, because there was somebody in there that was very, very insistent that the walls of Minas Tirith were black because it said they were like the walls of Orthanc. And I was trying to explain that they were like the walls of Orthanc in their construction and their strength, but they were white. And here we see very clearly that he is seeing a glimmer of white, and it is mentioned that he is seeing the Tower of Guard. Slowly Theoden sat down again, as if weariness still struggled to master him against the will of Gandalf. He turned and looked at his great house. "Alas," he said, "that these evil days should be mine, and should come in my old age instead of that peace that I have earned. Alas for Boromir the brave! The young perish and the old linger withering." He clutched his knees with his wrinkled hands.
"Your fingers would remember their old strength better if they grasped a sword hilt," said Gandalf. Theoden rose and put his hand to his side, but no sword hung at his belt. "Where has Grima stowed it?" he muttered under his breath. "Take this, dear lord," said a clear voice. "It was ever at your service." 2 men had come softly up the stair and stood now a few steps from the top. Eomer was there. No helm was on his head. No mail was on his breast. But in his hand he held a drawn sword, and as he knelt he offered the hilt to his master. "How comes this?" said Theoden sternly. He turned towards Eomer, and the men looked in wonder at him, standing now proud and erect. Where was the old man whom they had left crouching in his chair or leaning on his stick? "It is my doing, lord," said Hama, trembling. "I understood that Eomer was to be set free. Such joy was in my heart that maybe I have erred. Yet, since he was free again, and he a marshal of the mark, I brought him his sword, as he bade me." "To lay at your feet, my lord," said Eomer. For a moment of silence Theoden stood looking down at Eomer as he knelt still before him. Neither moved. "Will you not take the sword?" said Gandalf. Slowly Theoden stretched forth his hand. As his fingers took the hilt, it seemed to the watchers that firmness and strength returned to his thin arm. Suddenly he lifted the blade and swung it, shimmering and whistling in the air. Then he gave a great cry. His voice rang clear as he chanted in the tongue of Rohan a call to arms. "Arise now! Arise, riders of Theoden! Dire deeds awake, dark as it is eastward. Let horse be bridled, horn be sounded, forth, Eolingus!" The guards, thinking that they were summoned, sprang up the stair. They looked at their lord in amazement, and then as one man they drew their swords and laid them at his feet. "Command us," they said. "West to Theoden Hall!" cried Eomer. "It is a joy to see you returned into your own. Never again shall it be said, Gandalf, that you come only with grief." Now, I just want to pause here, just to highlight how amazing that scene is. There's not much to talk about lore-wise, but we have to just... Wow, how good is that, right? You could see where, Hrothgar is coming through in Theoden here, but really, like, the film version, they did a great job of showing a scene where we see this old, withered, and sort of dirty-looking man. But instead of him mostly being bent over and then seeing the surprising strength and seeing this old man stand very tall and swing his sword and do this commanding, booming voice, we get this sort of magical transformation into middle-aged man, And I'm not saying that it was a bad choice, but I'm just saying, can you imagine how cool it would have been had they done it like this? With the guard, with Eomer laying the sword there, and all the guards come rushing forward and everything, And yes, Tommy, he is one of the most amazing kings that Tolkien ever wrote about, because he just commands respect, and they're just wondering what happened to that other guy. That other guy, we didn't like him so much, but this is the guy we're looking for. I do want to highlight one thing that Theoden said, where he, how comes this? Oh, not that part. Hold on. Where was it here? Where he talked, oh, here it is. "Alas, that these evil days should be mine, and should come in my old age instead of that peace which I have earned." So really the first part, the last that these evil days should come, it's sort of very similar. He's almost saying like what Frodo said in the very beginning, "I wish this hadn't happened in my time," But then Theoden, who really is a king and a warrior and a leader, says, "If it had to happen during my time, I wish it had happened when I was younger." And yeah, it's I'm not saying that the film's use of magic was poor. I'm saying that sometimes the real magic is in seeing everybody in awe of Theoden, instead of the audience just being in awe of Gandalf. Oh, hey, Deborah, how's it going?
Glad to see you there. So like I said, I think that was sort of a mistake that Peter Jackson made. I think that if he had gone in a more subtle direction, saved a little bit of budget on the special effects, kept Theoden looking old, but suddenly strong and tall and commanding, it would have been really cool. Let us continue here. "Take back your sword, Eomer, sister son," said the king. "Go, Hama, and seek my own sword. Grima has it in his keeping. Bring him to me also. Now, Gandalf, you said that you had counsel to give. If I would hear it, what is your counsel?"
"You have yourself already taken it," answered Gandalf, "to put your trust in Eomer rather than in a man of crooked mind, to cast aside regret and fear, to do the deed at hand. Every man that can ride should be sent west at once, as Eomer counselled you. We must first destroy the threat of Saruman while we have time. If we fail, we fall. If we succeed, then we will face the next task. Meanwhile, your people that are left, the women and the children and the old, should fly to the refuges that you have in the mountains. Were they not prepared against such an evil day as this, let them take provision, but delay not, nor burden themselves with treasures great or small. It is their lives that are at stake."
"This counsel seems good to me now," said Theoden. "Let all my folk get ready. But you, my guests, truly you said, Gandalf, that the courtesy of my hall is lessened. You have ridden through the night, and the morning wears away. You have had neither sleep nor food. A guest-house shall be made ready. There you shall sleep when you have eaten." "Nay, lord," said Aragorn, "there is no rest yet for the weary. The men of Rohan must ride forth today, and we will ride with them, axe, sword, and bow. We did not bring them to rest against your wall, Lord of the Mark, as I promised Eomer that my sword and his shall be drawn together."
"Now indeed there is a hope of victory," said Eomer. "Hope, yes," said Gandalf, "but Isengard is strong. And the other perils draw ever nearer. Do not delay, Theoden, when we are gone. Lead your people swiftly to the hold of Dunharrow in the hills."
"Nay, Gandalf," said the king, "you do not know your own skill in healing. It shall not be so. I myself will go to war, to fall in front of the battle if it must be. Thus shall I sleep better." "Then even the defeat of Rohan will be glorious in song," said Aragorn. The armed men that stood near clashed their weapons, crying, "The Lord of the Mark will ride! Forth, Eorlingus!"
"But your people must not be both unarmed and shepherdless," said Gandalf. "Who shall guide them and govern them in your place?"
"I will take thought for that ere I go," answered Theoden. "Here comes my counsellor." At that moment Hama came again from the hall. Behind him, cringing between two other men, came Grima the Wormtongue. His face was very white. His eyes blinked in the sunlight. Hama knelt and presented to Theoden a long sword and a scabbard clasped with gold and set with green gems. "Here, Lord, is Herogrim, your ancient blade," he said. "It was found in his chest. Loth was he to render up the keys. Many other things are there which men have missed." "You lie," said Wormtongue, "and this sword your master himself gave into my keeping." "And he now requires it of you again," said Theoden. "Does that displease you?" "Assuredly not, lord," said Wormtongue. "I care for you and yours as best I may. But do not weary yourself, or tax too heavily your strength. Let others deal with these irksome guests. Your meat is about to be set on the board. Will you not go to it?" "I will," said Theoden. "And let food for my guests be set on the board beside me. The host rides today. Send the heralds forth. Let them summon all who dwell nigh, every man and strong lad able to bear arms, all who have horses. Let them be ready in the saddle at the gate ere the second hour from noon." "Dear lord," cried Wormtongue, "it is as I feared. This wizard has bewitched you. Are none to be left to defend the golden hall of your fathers and all of your treasure? None to guard the Lord of the Mark?" "If this is bewitchment," said Theoden, "it seems to me more wholesome than your whisperings. Your leechcraft ere long would have me walking on all fours like a beast. No, not one shall be left, not even Grima. Grima shall ride too. Go. You have yet time to clean the rust from your sword." "Mercy, lord," whined Wormtongue, grovelling on the ground.
Have pity on one worn out in your service. Send me not from your side. I at least will stand by you when all others have gone. Do not send your faithful Grima away.
You have my pity, said Theoden, and I do not send you from my side. I go myself to war with my men. I bid you come with me and prove your faith. Wormtongue looked from face to face. In his eyes was the hunted look of a beast, seeking some gap in the ring of his enemies. He licked his lips with a long, pale tongue.
Such a resolve might be expected from a lord of the house of Eorl, old though he be, he said. But those who truly love him would spare his failing years. Yet I see that I come too late. Others, whom the death of my lord would perhaps grieve less, have already persuaded him. If I cannot undo their work, hear me at least in this, lord. One who knows your mind and honours your command should be left in Edoras. Appoint a faithful steward. Let your counsel of Grima keep all the things until you return, and I pray that we may see it, though no wise man will deem it hopeful.
Eomer laughed. And if that plea does not excuse you from war, most noble Wormtongue, he said, what office of less honour would you accept, to carry a sack of meal up into the mountains, if any man would trust you with it?
Nay, Eomer, you do not fully understand the mind of Master Wormtongue, said Gandalf, turning his piercing glance upon him. He is bold and cunning. Even now he plays a game with peril and wins a throw. Hours of my precious time he has wasted already. Down, snake, he said suddenly in a terrible voice. Down on your belly. How long is it since Saruman bought you? What was the promised price? When all the men were dead, you were to pick your share of the treasure and take the women you desire? Too long have you watched her under your eyelids and haunted her steps.
Eomer grasped his sword. That I knew already, he muttered. For that reason I would have him slain. I would have slain him before, forgetting the law of the hall. But there are other reasons. He stepped forward, but Gandalf stayed him with his hand.
Eowyn is safe now, he said. But you, Wormtongue, you have done what you could for your true master. Some reward you have earned at least, yet Saruman is apt to overlook his bargains. I should advise you to go quickly and remind him lest he forget your faithful service. You lie, said Wormtongue. That word comes too often easy from your lips, said Gandalf. I do not lie. See, Theoden, here is a snake. With safety you cannot take it with you, nor can you leave it behind. To slay it would be just, but it was not always as it is now. Once it was a man, and did you service in its fashion. Give him a horse, and let him go at once, wherever he chooses. By his own choice you shall judge him.
Do you hear this, Wormtongue? Said Theoden. This is your choice, to ride to war with me, and let us see in battle whether you are true, or to go now whither you will. But then, if ever we meet again, I shall not be merciful. Slowly Wormtongue rose. He looked at them with half-closed eyes. Last of all he scanned Theoden's face and opened his mouth as if to speak. Then suddenly he drew himself up. His hands worked, his eyes glittered. Such malice was in him that men stepped back from him. He bared his teeth, and then with a hissing breath he spat before the king's feet, and darting to one side he fled down the stair. After him, said Theoden. See that he does no harm to any, but do not hurt him or hinder him. Give him a horse if he wishes it.
And if any will bear him, said Eomer.
One of the guards ran down from the stair, another went to the well at the foot of the terrace, and in his helm drew water. With it he washed clean the stones that Wormtongue had defied. All right, I need to take in some water here. So, once again, it was mentioned, what a leader Theoden is, that he, gets this amount of respect from his men. And here you see it, that Wormtongue spits in front of him, and very quickly somebody takes off their own helm to fetch water and to wash that away. That's the commanding presence of Theoden. There was something I wanted to talk about here, though. Oh, so there is a bit of humor here with Eomer. So, Theoden decides to, do what Gandalf has advised him to do, which is always a good thing to do with Gandalf. If Gandalf is giving you advice, his advice is very valuable. He doesn't give it out to just anybody. And if he tells you, hey, this would be the right thing to do, this is really what you should do, you know? He tells him, let him go where he wants. And then you could judge him based on what his choice is. He's saying, don't command him. Let's see what he would do with freedom. And of course, he runs out and goes back to Saruman. So then we know 100% we can't trust this guy. Now, and he even says what Gandalf had told him, give him a horse if he wants it. And Éomer says, and if one would bear him. And this sort of seems almost like, sort of kicking a man while he's down. Like, a horse wouldn't even let you ride on his back. But this is actually way, way more cutting when we consider the incredible importance that horses have in the Rohan culture. Rohan, horse country, Rohirrim, horse lords, Riddermark, mark of the riders. There's a horse on their flag, horses on their emblems. They bury their horses with them. Their horses all have names and epithets and everything. Horses are considered just as much citizens of Rohan as men are. So to say, if a horse would bear him is not even, it's insulting, but not in the specific way that you might think initially. It's not saying that not even an animal would let you ride on his back, but saying that a horse of Rohan would not bear a traitor, that they are too smart and too noble for that, essentially. All right, let us continue. Now, my guests, come, said Theoden. Come and take such refreshment as haste allows. They passed back into the great house. Already they heard below them in the town the heralds crying and the war horns blowing, for the king was to ride forth as soon as the men in the town and those dwelling near could be armed and assembled. At the king's board sat Éomer and the 4 guests, and there also, waiting upon the king, was the lady Eowyn. They ate and drank swiftly. The others went silent while Theoden questioned Gandalf concerning Saruman. How far back his treachery goes, who can guess, said Gandalf. He was not always evil. Once I do not doubt that he was the friend of Rohan, and even when his heart grew colder, he found you useful still. But for long now he has plotted your ruin, wearing the mask of friendship until he was ready. In those years Wormtongue's task was easy, and all that you did was swiftly known in Isengard, for your land was open, and strangers came and went, and ever Wormtongue's whispering was in your ears, poisoning your thought, chilling your heart, weakening your limbs, while others watched and could do nothing, for your will was in his keeping. But when I escaped and warned you, then the mask was torn for those who would see. After that Wormtongue played dangerously, always seeking to delay you, to prevent your full strength from being gathered. He was crafty, dulling men's weariness or working on their fears, as served the occasion. Do you not remember how eagerly he urged that no man should be spared on a wild goose chase northward, when the immediate peril was westward? He persuaded you to forbid Éomer to pursue the raiding orcs. If Éomer had not defied Wormtongue's voice speaking with your mouth, those orcs would have reached Isengard by now, bearing a great prize. Not indeed that prize which Saruman desires above all others, but at least 2 members of my company, sharers of a secret hope, of which even to you, Lord, I cannot speak yet openly. Dare you think of what they might now be suffering, or what Saruman might have learned from our destruction? I owe much to Éomer, said Theoden. Faithful heart may have froward tongue. Say also, said Gandalf, that to crooked eyes truth may wear a wry face. Indeed, my eyes are almost blind, said Theoden. Most of all I owe to you, my guest. Once again you have come in time. I would give you a gift ere we go, at your own choosing. You have only to name aught that is mine. I reserve now only my sword. Whether I come in time or not is yet to be seen, said Gandalf. But as for your gift, Lord, I will choose one that will fit my need swift and sure. Give me Shadowfax. He was only lent before, if loan we may call it, but now I shall ride him into great hazard, setting silver against black, and I would not risk anything that is not my own.
and already there is a bond of love between us." "You choose well," said Theoden, "and I give him now gladly. Yet it is a great gift. There is none like to Shadowfax. In him one of the mighty steeds of old has returned. None such shall return again. And to you, my other guests, I will offer such things as may be found in my armory. Swords you do not need, but there are helms and coats of mail of cunning work, gifts to my fathers out of Gondor. Choose from these ere we go, and may they serve you well." Now men came bearing raiment of war from the king's hoard, and they arrayed Aragorn and Legolas in shining mail. Helms too they chose, and round shields. Their bosses were overlaid with gold and set with gems, green and red and white. Gandalf took no armor, and Gimli needed no coat of rings, even if one had been found to match his stature, for there was no hauberk in the hordes of Edoras of better make than his short corselet forged beneath the mountain in the north. But he chose a cap of iron and leather that fitted well upon his round head, and a small shield he also took. It bore the running horse, white upon green. That was the emblem of the house of Eorl. "May it keep you well," said Theoden. "It was made for me in Thengel's day when I was still a boy." Gimli bowed. "I am proud, Lord of the Mark, to bear your device," he said. "Indeed, sooner would I bear a horse than be borne by one. I love my feet better, but maybe I shall come yet where I can stand and fight." "It may well be so," said Theoden. The king now rose, and at once Eowyn came forward bearing wine. "Further Theoden Hall," she said, "receive now this cup, and drink happy hour. Health be upon thee at thy coming and going." Theoden drank from the cup, and she then proffered it to the guests. As she stood before Aragorn, she paused suddenly and looked upon him, and her eyes were shining. And he looked down upon her fair face and smiled. But as she took the cup, his hand met hers, and he knew that she trembled at the touch. "Hail, Aragorn, son of Arathorn," she said. "Hail, Lady of Rohan," he answered, but his face now was troubled, and he did not smile. When they had all drunk, the king went down the halls to the doors. There the guards awaited him, and heralds stood, and all the lords and chiefs were gathered together that remained in Edoras or dwelt nearby. "Behold, I go forth, and it seems like to be my last riding," said Theoden. "I have no child. Theodred, my son, is slain. I name Eomer, my sister's son, to be my heir. If neither of us return, then choose a new lord as you will. But to some one I must now entrust my people that I leave behind, to rule them in my place. Which of you will stay?" No man spoke. "Is there none who you would name? In whom do my people trust?" "In the house of Eorl," answered Hama. "But Eomer I cannot spare, nor would he stay," said the king, "and he is the last of that house." "I said not Eomer," answered Hama, "and he is not the last. There is Eowyn, daughter of Eamund his sister. She is fearless and high-hearted. All love her. Let her be as lord to the Eorlingus while we are gone." "It shall be so," said Theoden. "Let the heralds announce to the folk that the Lady Eowyn will lead them." Then the king sat upon a seat before his doors, and Eowyn knelt before him and received from him a sword and a fair corselet. "Farewell, sister-daughter," he said. "Dark is the hour. Yet maybe we shall return to the Golden Hall. But in Dunharrow the people may long defend themselves, and if the battles go ill, thither will we come all who can escape." "Speak not so," she answered. "A year shall I endure for every day that passes until your return." But as she spoke, her eyes went to Aragorn, who stood near by. "The king shall come again," he said. "Fear not. Not west, but east does our doom await us." So once again, you see a little bit here of the romantic tension. But you can see it being tempered by rewrites between Aragorn and Eowyn, where, she brings him the cup and he drinks from it and their hands touch and she's quivering. But then he's suddenly not smiling and he's just like, "Oh no, she's got a crush on me. This is a problem. I gotta let her down easy." So that's coming. The king now went down the stair with Gandalf beside him. The others followed. Aragorn looked back as they passed towards the gate. Alone Eowyn stood before the doors of the house at the stair's head. The sword was set upright before her, and her hands were laid upon the hilt. She was clad now in mail, and shone like silver in the sun. Gimli walked with Legolas, his axe on his shoulder. Well, at last we set off, he said. Men need many words before deeds. My axe is restless in my hands. Though I doubt not that these Rohirrim are fell-handed when it comes to it. Nonetheless, this is not the warfare that suits me. How shall I come to the battle? I wish I could walk and not bump like a sack at Gandalf's saddle-bow.
A safer seat than many, I guess, said Legolas. Yet doubtless Gandalf will gladly put you down on your feet when blows begin, or Shadowfax himself. An axe is no weapon for a rider.
And a dwarf is no horseman. It is Orknecks I would hew, not shave the scalps of men, said Gimli,
patting the haft of his axe. At the gate they found a great host of men, old and young, already in the saddle. More than 1,000 there were mustered. Their spears were like a springing wood. Loudly and joyously they shouted as Theoden came forth. Some held in readiness the king's horse, Snowmane, and others held the horses of Aragorn and Legolas. Gimli stood ill at ease, frowning, but Éomer came to him, leading his horse.
"Hail, Gimli, Gloin's son," he cried. "I have not yet had time to learn gentle speech under your rod as you promised, but shall we not put aside our quarrel? At least I will speak no evil again of the Lady of the Wood." "I will forget my wrath for a while, Éomer, son of Éomer," said Gimli. "But if you ever chance to see the Lady Galadriel with your own eyes, then you shall acknowledge her the fairest of ladies, or our friendship will end."
"So be it," said Éomer. "But until that time, pardon me, and in token of pardon, ride with me, I beg. Gandalf will be at the head of the Lord of the Mark, but Firefoot, my horse, will bear us both, if you will."
"I thank you indeed," said Gimli, greatly pleased. "I will gladly go with you if Legolas, my comrade, may ride beside us."
"It shall be so," said Éomer. "Legolas upon my left and Aragorn upon my right, and none will dare to stand before us." So let me pause here. I love this. I always love the wholesomeness of it, the friendship that blossoms between Éomer and Gimli. Always thought it was great. And I just love it where he said, hey, I know we started off on a bad foot. Let's put all that aside and be friends. And I'll agree. I won't say anything bad about Galadriel, because he knows that was a mistake. Now, he knew right when he said it that it was a mistake. And Gimli is saying, I'm down. Let's do this. But if you ever see Galadriel, and you don't say she's the most beautiful woman in all of Middle Earth, and he's not saying elf, man, hobbit, dwarf. He's saying in all of ladies. Then that's it. Our friendship's over. And I love this because we're going to come back to it in book 6 where Éomer is going to say, hey, look, I got to be honest with you. I've seen her and I can't say she's the most beautiful. But he has a very good reason, just because he also saw Arwen and he thinks Arwen is more beautiful. And then Gimli realizes that all they have at this point is just a slight difference of opinion, really. A blonde and a brunette. The morning and the night, the sun and the moon. That's the way that Gimli puts it, at least. Just a matter of taste at that point. And that it's not insulting to say that Galadriel is the second most beautiful woman in Middle-earth, just a matter of opinion. So Gimli's a gentleman. I always disliked, I have a lot of respect for John Rhys Davis, and especially the job he did playing Treebeard, but I disliked the depiction of Gimli in the films, not because of the acting, but because of the script. They made him buffoonish, they made him crass, they made him sort of the joke, the comedic relief. And when you look at it, he tells a few jokes here and there, but he's really sort of the least comical member of the Fellowship, other than maybe Gandalf. Gandalf is not very comical himself. But, when you think about it, who were the funny ones? Who were the ones that are cracking jokes? Legolas cracks jokes. Merry and Pippin crack jokes. Sam cracks jokes. Even Aragorn cracks jokes. Gimli doesn't really do that. He's more of the warrior poet trope than the comic relief sort of funny guy trope. And I don't mean to speak too harshly on the films, because I do love the films, but it's sort of a trend that started during that time period when The Lord of the Rings was being released as a film trilogy, that I think it sort of really reached critical mass when the Marvel Cinematic Universe started really hitting us hard. sort of the Joss Whedonification of writing, where everybody has to be funny. Everybody has to be constantly quipping. Everybody's just so witty and is making references all the time, right? And I think we see it now, and I think we're all a little tired of it, and I think Hollywood is starting to back off of that a little bit, so it's not so much a problem. But it even did plague the Lord of the Rings a little bit. Everybody had to have at least like one really, really funny line in each movie. Gimli was pretty much bumbling, You feel Gimli's portrayal was a bit of a letdown for the dwarf race in Tolkien's works. Yeah. I mean, there's no other way to go about it, and it's interesting because Gimli really is the only dwarf in the story. Yeah, Gloin is there, in Rivendell, but then that's just a really minor part. Salted pork. It's very quick, and there are no other dwarves that are major characters. Dane Ironfoot's part of the story is in the appendix. So Gimli is aware the whole time. You might even say sort of genre savvy. He is aware that he's the only dwarf. Not the only dwarf in Middle-earth, but the only dwarf in every scene that he's in, really, except for the few moments that he's with his father. So he knows that in everything that he does and that everything he says, he is representing the dwarves as a whole. And the very last thing that he would do is give anyone a negative opinion of dwarves. I mean, this is the guy who, right in front of Celeborn, who is like the biggest anti-dwarf racist in Middle-earth, got his wife to give him 3 hairs. Which we talked about that when it happened and how amazingly significant that is if you know the history of Middle-earth and you know the history of Galadriel. For her to give her hair to anybody, it's huge. And he just basically moved the repairing of the dwarf and elf friendship forward by hundreds of years. And by the way, Celeborn, if we accept the Sindar origin, because there's 2 different origins for him. We'll talk about this more when we do Unfinished Tales. But there's a Sindar origin and there's a Falmar origin, and they're both really interesting. But the Sindar origin is the one we generally go with. And if we accept the Sindar origin for Celeborn, he was there when in Doriath when the dwarves killed Thingol, and Thingol was the most important of all the Sindar, you know what I mean? And they killed him, and it was all over the Silmaril. It was all over Silmaril. It was over, and what Thingol was trying to do was to affix the Silmaril to a necklace, which was called the Nauglamir. Now, if you know the Elvish word for the dwarves, it's Naugrim. So Nauglamir is essentially it transliterates a little more complicated, but what it essentially means is necklace of the dwarves. So he wanted to say here, the Silmaril is one of the greatest things an elf has ever made. The Nauglamir is one of the greatest things the dwarves have ever made. Let's make them into one thing and truly bring together these 2 kinds. We've had our differences in the past. There was a whole mess with the petty dwarves. We were wrong, they were wrong, but it's all in the past. Let's come together. And then this stupid fight breaks out that, where a bunch of egos clashed. And he winds up dead, not dead, but slain. Okay, you're back in Valinor now. Doriath falls. It leads to just this big disaster. So people like Celeborn, who were in Doriath, and if we believe the Sindar interpretation of his origin, he's a relation to Thingol. He could be like a cousin or something. He doesn't like dwarves anymore, you know what I mean? And he doesn't understand his wife Galadriel and why she's so friendly with the dwarves. He doesn't understand guys like Celebrimbor, because Celebrimbor was a big dwarf guy. He loved the dwarves. He created Eregion because he wanted to have a part of Gil-galad's country that would be next to the dwarves and where they could learn from each other and where they could be friends with each other. And what happened? He winds up dead. And of course, that wasn't the dwarves. That was Sauron's fault, But somebody like, when you become like, but Celeborn has become a racist, really, he's going to find any way to blame dwarves for everything. And we see it in The Lord of the Rings. He finds out Gandalf died in Moria, and he goes on this rant. I should have served him right for going to a place like that, bad neighborhood, essentially. So, Gimli is aware that in every single word he says, he's basically speaking for his whole people. Is that fair? Not really. It's not fair to him to basically just become an ambassador for an entire race and to have the entire race judged by his actions and his actions alone and his words alone. But regardless of the fact, he accepts this burden, this magnificent burden, and does an exemplary job of it. I said, growing up, Gimli was my favorite character. Now, I lean into Gandalf and Sambor, for The Lord of the Rings at least, and overall, there's other characters like Tur. But when it comes down to it, Gimli was my favorite growing up, and this is a big part of it, because I'm coming off of The Hobbit, which I read when I was very young. I was 7 years old when I read The Hobbit. And that was chock full of dwarves. There's 13 primary dwarf characters in it, and then towards the end, we get Dane Ironfoot, and they're all really important. We get to see the good and the bad and the ugly with them, but now we're basically having their entire race being represented by one guy. We know, and it's not to mention that it's Gloin's son. You know what I mean? This is when we look at the Hobbit, if you go back and you read it. Out of all the hobbits, ignore that. Out of all the dwarves, Gloin was sort of the rudest to Bilbo. Thorin was pretty nasty too, but Gloin was sort of like just kind of rude. We see it really early on in The Hobbit. He's more of a grocer than a burglar. In Unfinished Tales, there is a line from Gloin where he even refers to all hobbits as simpletons. So, obviously he's learned how very incorrect he was to hold those opinions, and now he has this great respect for hobbits in general, and especially for Bilbo. And now, of course, Gimli has a great affection for Frodo. We didn't get a lot of them together, but I mean, Frodo was the one he wanted to show the mirror to, and Durin's crown and all that stuff. So, that's why I have issues with Gimli's portrayal in the film, because they took a character who is really important and they kind of just made him funny, oh, here he's drunk, he's falling, he's belching, They made him crass and rude, and that's not at all what he's supposed to be. Let me read what Walter said here. The dwarves of the First Age were absolute monsters, being the only race to injure Glaurung, with Azaghal using his blade to pierce the belly of the father of dragons during his own last moments. Yeah, and it was said that out of all the races, that the dwarves were the best at killing dragons. And when you think about that, it's true. Now, most of the dragon slayers that we know are men. It was a man that killed Skatha. It was a man that killed Smaug. It was a half-elf that killed Ancalagon, and it was a man that killed Glaurung. But there were a lot of other dragons that didn't necessarily have names that we were ever told, and we're just sort of told that, yeah, the dwarves were really good at killing dragons. And you're right. Somebody once asked me on Quora, who in the Fellowship is the most fearsome warrior, and I said, it's Gimli. It's Gimli. If he flies into a rage, there's nothing that's going to stop him. You know what I mean? There's nothing. The only chance that you would have is to just be really far away, and be really good with a bow. You know what I mean? That's it. You know. And interestingly enough, even then, you're not guaranteed anything because his armor is so good, and we're even told here that he doesn't accept armor from them. Like Legolas has new armor, Aragorn has new armor, Gandalf doesn't need armor, but Gimli, he's like, well, mine's already. I'll take a helm, and I'll take a shield, but the actual halberd, I have something better than that already. What dwarf realm is Gimli from? Well, he's from Erebor. He's from Erebor because he's Gloin's son. Although he didn't live in Erebor for his whole life, during the events of the Hobbits, he was actually in the Blue Mountains, which are just north of the Shire, actually. So that's where he really grew up. I don't doubt his prowess, just the length of his arms. That was a line about Merry, actually, in the movie version. Although Merry also, he proved himself too, didn't he? All right, let's continue. What time? I'm just wondering if we're only going to do one chapter today. I don't know, because we're at the end of this chapter. I don't want to rush through Helm's Deep. I really don't. So what I'm thinking here is we'll finish this chapter and then stop for the day. Even though I would normally go later, because I don't want to stop in the middle of a chapter. I don't want to go very, very late, because I get tired, my voice gets tired, and then the next day I sound like this. Especially since I have a stream in the afternoon to do. So for my gaming channel, we'll be playing Final Fantasy. So I'm thinking I don't want to rush through Helm's Deep. Helm's Deep's not a long chapter, but I don't want to have to feel like I gotta get through it quickly. Next time, we'll get through multiple chapters, because Helm's Deep is pretty quick, and then the road to Isengard is eventful, but it's not very long. So we could probably get through 2 next time. Flotsam and Jetsam is not very... The Two Towers chapters are short, but they're just jam-packed. You know what I mean? With the Fellowship of the Ring, there were only 2 chapters that took up entire streams. One was the Council of Elrond, and the other was Flight to the Ford. And it was just because Council of Elrond is the longest chapter in the entire book. And I mean the Lord of the Rings, not just the Fellowship of the Ring. And Flight to the Ford just has it's a lot of action, and there's a lot of things happening there. So, So I think what we'll do is, because it's going on 10 o'clock, we would normally go till 10:30. We're not going to end right now. We have about 2 pages left. But I want to finish this chapter, and then we'll stop if that's okay with you guys. And, yeah. And, of course, we'll be back with more. Now, this month, we don't have another reading stream because there's only 4 Thursdays in the month. But... I try to jam in more reading streams whenever we have more than 4 Thursdays, But we will be streaming next week, but we're going to play the Fellowship of the Ring video game. All right, let's continue here. Let's see, where did I lead off here? Oh, here we are. Okay.
"Here is Shadowfax," said Gandalf. "Running wild over the grass," they answered. "He will let no man handle him. There he goes, away down by the ford, like a shadow among the willows." Gandalf whistled and called aloud the horse's name, and far away he tossed his head and neighed, and turning sped toward the host like an arrow. "Were the breath of the west wind to take a body visible, even so would it appear," said Eomer, as the great horse ran up until it stood before the wizard. See, already I have to stop. Now, this is really, really interesting. Not only what Eomer said, but the specific format in which it's written. Eomer says, were the breath of the west wind to take a body visible, even so would it appear. Now, what we see a lot of times with Tolkien is that he uses the word west in different meanings.
depending on whether or not he capitalizes the word. Now, when he just writes west with the lowercase w, he's just saying the direction, the west, right? I said, I am in Pennsylvania. If I go far enough west, eventually I'll be in Ohio. That's not west with a capital W. When he says west with a capital W, he's either referring to, there's three things that it could refer to, capital W. Sometimes it's the concept of the men of the West, and basically the civilization that represents what Numenor represented. The second thing is Numenor itself. Even though it's gone, it's still referred to as capital W West. And the most prevalent thing that capital W West refers to is the Undying Lands, Aemon. But what's interesting here, he not only says breath of the west wind, where west is capitalized, but the word wind is capitalized. Now, why in the world would Tolkien choose to capitalize wind? Were the breath of the west wind to take a body visible, he's saying it would look like Shadowfax. Now, let's talk about this. Who dwells in the west? Yes, the elves and the Ainur. Specifically, Manwe, the king of the breath of Arda, the wind. He's the wind king, and also he is the head of all of the Valar, and essentially the steward of the earth itself. Or I should say, the head steward, because all of the Ainur are stewards. Even Gandalf is a steward of the earth. So, where do these horses come from? The Maerys, it was said a few times already. I didn't comment, and I'm going to comment on it now. The Maerys are a race of noble horses that are descended from the steed that bore Orome himself, the great huntsman of the Valar, the first person to see the elves, who discovered them. He'll take a couple of invisible bodies before the end. Yeah, indeed. And there is a common thread of the breath of the West coming out. We see it happen at the fall of Sauron. We see it happen when Saruman dies. Even the herald of Manwe in Middle-earth is the Lord of the Eagles. Now, we talked about the Lord of the Eagles earlier in reference to the fall of Gondolin, where I said his name was Thorondor, which literally means Eagle Lord. However, in the Third Age, we have Gwaihir, which means Wind Lord. And who shows up at all the climactic battles? Who shows up at the Battle of Five Armies? Who shows up right before the fall of Sauron? The Eagles. What are they referred to in the Silmarillion? The birds of heaven. So basically, Éomer is in awe, almost a religious awe of this horse. And this is partly because he's from a culture where horses are so revered, but he's specifically saying this horse is as to one of the Valar, is what he's saying. He's saying that if Manwe himself was given form in Middle-earth, this is how I would imagine him to be. Let's continue. The gift seems already to be given, said Theoden. But hearken all! Here now I name my guest Gandalf Greyhame, wisest of counsellors, most welcome of wanderers, a lord of the Mark, and chieftain of the Aer Lingus while our kin shall last, and I give to him Shadowfax, prince of horses. I thank you, Theoden King, said Gandalf. Then suddenly he threw back his grey cloak and cast aside his hat, and leaped to horseback. He wore no helm nor mail. His snowy hair flew free in the wind. His white robe shone dazzling in the sun. Behold the White Rider, cried Aragorn, and all took up the words.
"Our king and the White Rider," they shouted. "For Theolingus!" The trumpet sounded. The horses reared and neighed. Spear clashed on shield. Then the king raised his hand, and with a rush, like the sudden onset of a great wind, the last host of Rohan rode thundering into the west. Far over the plain, Eowyn saw the glitter of their spears as she stood still, alone before the doors of the silent house. So that is where we'll stop. That is the end of that chapter. So I don't mean to make it where it's only one chapter in a stream, but that just sometimes comes out that way because we have to stop and talk so many times. And that really is the whole point of it. If you wanted to hear just the book, I suppose you'd get the audio version. I'd love to do audiobooks. I'd love to be able to do the audiobook. But, I started doing this whole thing because I always wanted to do reading streams, even back before I started the Tolkien channel. I thought it would be cool to occasionally do reading streams on Twitch. And I looked into it, and the legality of it was in question, that it really is up to the copyright holder if it's a copyrighted work. And, and I thought of doing stuff that's in the public domain, like Dracula or Beowulf, but, but I really, what I would have always wanted to do was Tolkien's works. And, I looked into, just like straight up just getting permission from the Tolkien estate. And what I found out was that they will give you permission to do readings, and there's all these sort of rules that you have to follow, but you can't do it over the internet. They don't allow that. It has to be in person. So, the way that I said, I had a talk over with a few people, and we figured out the way to do it is that if it's fair use. And how do you do it in fair use? There's a few different ways, and one of the biggest ways is to make it educational. And since I was starting an educational YouTube channel here, it made sense to me to do this, So, yeah. Just to go over Tolkien's frogs? What do you mean by that, Moogle? Just to go over, what we have left here in Book 4. We have Helm's Deep. We have The Road to Isengard. We have Flotsam and Jetsam. We have The Voice of Saruman, very important chapter. And we have The Palantir, a very important chapter, and that's the end of Book 3, and that's where Book 4 starts, He never really had frogs in The Lord of the Rings. That would have been did he ever mention frogs? I'm trying to, a lot of people get into this sort of mode where if he didn't mention a specific animal, then it must not exist. But actually, no, toads are mentioned. Is that close enough for you, Moogle? Toads are mentioned. Especially, I believe, at some point, Gandalf threatens to turn Barlam and Butterbur into a. Thank you for the tip, Chewy. Thank you so much. Bravo, great reading. Thank you very much for that. Yeah. You recently read Dracula for the first time. The 200 pages in the middle were tough to get through. It can be. I'm no Dracula scholar, but it is one of my favorite works. But I do like to collect and watch different adaptations of it, As a matter of fact, one of my favorite versions a good friend of mine got as a gift for me, which was one of the BBC Draculas. That was really, really good. But Dracula is one of my favorite stories. It can be a rough read at times. It can be. But thank you so much for the tip there. Rohan gets a decent amount of comparisons to the mythic past, whether it's Shadowfax having a quality that is alike, being to be foaled in an early age in the world, or Theoden's famous charge later. Well, yeah, so I mentioned Beowulf and I mentioned Hrothgar, and Rohan is very much, even though they exist in the south, they're part of the Southlands, they are based on the idea of the Northmen of Europe. If we were to compare them to a real analog, they would be something, like the Danes, the Vikings, except they not on so much on ships and everything. Maybe the Saxons are a better choice there. Everyone is always weirdly praising each other in Dracula. Well, it's because of the way that it was written, being,
in the form of various correspondences, So it's sort of like, whenever you're sending a letter to someone, you just have to, greet them and tell them how great they are and everything, But, it's interesting because we talk about, the Lord of the Rings and how it's not at all an allegory, but Dracula very much is an allegory. So there's a lot of allegorical stuff going on there, I wonder if the peoples of Rohan ever had any encounter with Beorn or the skin changers, considering their style seems so familiar. Yes, as a matter of fact, I believe it was Gandalf himself that brought up that connection and said that these men that came up out of the south and everything mixed with the people that were already there, and Beorn was like that, and that's how the Beornings came about. But that Beorn had more in common with the men of Rohan than he had with the men of Rovanion, or because the men of Rohan were the men of Rovanion in the past. Yeah. You went like 20 years before you realized Alucard is Dracula backwards. Oh, Caleb. That's great. Now, which Alucard were you referring to? Were you referring to the there's an anime Alucard, there's a video game Alucard, and there's a movie Alucard. And what's interesting is that in the film version, which was, I think it was in the 40s when it was Son of Dracula, they Count Alucard actually was Dracula. He was just hiding, as Alucard, But yeah, I'm gonna assume the video game, Castlevania. What's interesting is that Alucard in that he didn't come from that game. He came from an older one, Castlevania 3. Dracula's Curse on the old Nintendo, which, by the way, I still have the cartridge. I could grab it, but I'm not going to. But it was the first game that I ever bought with my own money when I was really young. I saved up allowance money, and my parents took me to Toys R Us to get a NES game, and I chose that one. And that was my first. Not actually, it wasn't my first experience with Alucard, because I had read a lot of books on old horror, and I watched a lot of old horror, so I knew about Alucard from the film. But anyway, what's interesting? Okay, so do you know what Caleb? We're gonna have a little minor discussion here before we end stream. Do you know that Alucard from the game? Do you know what his real name is? Let's see if you know this. Don't anybody just blurt it out. I'm asking Caleb specifically. Do you know what his real name is? Because obviously it's not Alucard. That would be too ridiculous for Dracula to just name his son his own name backwards. I mean, that's not even his name. I know Dracula's real name turned out to be Matthias Kronqvist. But of course he went by Vlad Tepes. You don't know? So his real name was actually Adrian. Adrian Fahrenheit Tepes. And later he dropped the Tepes. He took his mother's maiden name, Adrian Fahrenheit. And he was using Alucard as a way of showing that he was the opposite of his father, which is really a fun thought. But what's interesting is that even though he started off in that old Nintendo game, the one that we really think of, that we associate Alucard is Symphony of the Night, and there are a ton of Tolkien references in that game, and some of them are very obscure. Some of them are obvious, but a lot of them are pretty obscure references. And what's interesting is that nearly all of them were added specifically to the English version of the game. Of course, it was originally made in Japanese. And a lot of these items and things that were Tolkien references were called something else in Japanese. There's a weapon called the Fist of Tulkas. Of course, Tulkas being one of the Valar, sort of analogous to Heracles. There is a Ring of Varda, which can only appear in New Game Plus. Now, the description of it says one ring to rule them all, but of course it's not that ring. It's the Ring of Varda. It's the best item in the game. And, of course, Varda being the queen of the Valar Manwe's wife, and I think it's supposed to be sort of her... there were definitely some Tolkien nerds on the translation team. It was supposed to be like her wedding ring. There were a few others. Mormeagle was a big one. There was a dark sword, an almost useless weapon, unless you wanted to fight Victor Belmont, called Mormeagle, which is Elvish. It means black sword. And it was what some of the elves called Turin Turambar. They called him Mormeagle, or the Black Sword. The sword wasn't called Mormeagle. The sword was originally called Anglachel until he... Yes, she was burnt at the stake. Until it was reforged, and then it was called Gurthang. But in the game, there is a sword called Mormeagle, which is a reference to Turin's sword. So just showing that they were making references to not just to the Lord of the Rings, but to the Silmarillion and to the Children of Húrin. But the one that actually was in the Japanese version was the Chrysogram. And the Chrysogram is a weapon that shows up a lot in the Castlevania series. Oftentimes it's not called that. Sometimes it's translated like as Valmanwe, but in Japanese, if you're in Symphony of the Night, it was Chrysogram. I looked it up to see what the Japanese said, and it did say Chrysogram, and that's actually the name of the ring of mountains that surrounded Gondolin, and it's also the best weapon in Symphony of the Night. So it's really interesting that I think somebody who was translating saw Chrysogram and then got really excited because they're like, oh my God, I know what that is. That's from the Fall of Gondolin. That's from Tolkien. Let's put a whole bunch of other Tolkien things into here. Maybe now, okay, so, well, here's the thing. A lot of times the original names weren't that interesting. You know what I mean? Like here, let me for example, let's use Mormeagle as an example. Let's see. I'm looking up what Mormeagle was in Japan. It was called Holy Buster. And that's actually kind of a bad name for what it is, because if you have a weapon called Holy Buster, you might expect it to be a holy weapon. But it's actually a dark weapon meant to be used against holy enemies, of which there's only like 2 in the whole game. One of which you're not really supposed to fight. And by the way, Tolkien is not the only literary reference in Symphony of the Night. One of them was there was a demon. Tell me if you remember this. It was made up out of a whole bunch of bodies in a circle. And in Japan, it was called Legion, which is a biblical reference. And in a lot of the other games, it's translated as Legion. But in Symphony of the Night, they called it Granfalun, which is actually a reference to a line from a Kurt Vonnegut novel where he defined a Granfalun as a meaningless conglomeration of people. So sometimes I just really appreciate how clever they were being with their translations. And keep in mind that translations are not really supposed to be faithful, because if you just translate everything word by word, there's going to be a lot of like Japanese puns that are not going to translate. There's going to be a lot of cultural stuff that we're not going to understand. And as a matter of fact, there was one translator who in the 40s and 50s was translating some old English stuff, and people said that he was being too creative and not faithful enough. Can you guess who it is that I'm talking about? Why? This wasn't published until after he died. Same thing with this one, and there's a bunch of others too. Fall of Arthur, the Kalevala, so there's a lot of stuff out there like that. And Tolkien was trying to, let's keep the spirit of the story, but it has to be beautiful poetry in English as it was beautiful poetry in whatever language he was translated for it, whether it was Anglo-Saxon or Middle English or Old Norse or Latin or whatever it was that he was working from. So, yeah. So there's a lot of like real cleverness that is in Symphony of the Night. Now, the gaming streams that I've done here on this channel, and I'm talking about YouTube in this sense, have been exclusively games based off of Tolkien's works. And there's so many more of them to get through. But maybe one day, even though I've played it on Twitch so many times, maybe one day we should go through specifically Castlevania Symphony of the Night, just to point out all the Tolkien stuff in it and all the other literary stuff in it, because there's so much. There's so much of it. There's enemy names, there's weapons, there's items, there's a lot of stuff that wound up being taken from Tolkien. I even tried to one day to bring up a list. I Googled it, like, can we get a list of all the Tolkien stuff in Symphony of the Night? And somebody had a list, and I was like, this is so incomplete. I can think of like 3 things that aren't on here. So I think I'd have to go through it slowly myself and point out all these things, because otherwise I don't think anybody else has really cataloged all that stuff, But let's see. I'm gonna look at, before we end. Let's see. Okay, so another one was Fist of Tulkas. Tulkas was known to fight barehanded. What was that in Japanese? So in Japanese, the Fist of Tulkas was called orichalcum, which, like, once again, does that really make sense? Orichalcum is like a mythical mineral, right? So it doesn't make sense to necessarily call a weapon, like something that you would affix to your fist to help you, like a knuckle duster sort of thing. Doesn't make sense to call it an orichalcum necessarily. The Ring of Varda, what was that in Japanese? It was called the Skull Ring. Now that's really weird, because the purpose of the Ring of Varda is to raise all of your stats by some insane amount. It just makes you so much more powerful. And you wonder, well, why would a skull ring do that, So sometimes the names themselves were just a little bit awkward. I'm trying to think. There was at least 1 or 2 enemies that were Tolkien references, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. Any excuse to just play Castlevania again, I guess. Maybe one day we'll do it for fun. It's not a very long game. And we could go through it and point out all the Tolkien stuff in it. I mean, I did it a little bit the last time I played it on Twitch. I talked about, the chrysogram and all this stuff. But thing about the Ring of Varda is you can't get it the first time through. You have to beat the game and then start a new game plus. So that's okay. I mean, the ring does look like a skull. So, hey there, praise the sun. We're just about to end, but welcome in anyway. We're just about to end. We're just kind of like talking about some random stuff here. But let's see. Okay, here I have a few. I found the incomplete list that I was talking about. Oh, yes, that's right. There was a Ring of Feanor as well. So there was a Ring of Feanor in Castlevania. In Japanese, it was simply the Master Ring. But yeah, Ring of Feanor. Now, Feanor was never, mentioned to be wearing a ring, but that's just another reference that was in there. The Moblung sword. That's another one. Moblung sword in Japanese was called what? Ramuria Sodo. Lamia sword, I think. Or Ramuria Sodo? I think that's Lamia sword. Moblung. That's a good one. And there was... Okay, the Ice Brand, that's not a Tolkien name, but the description of the Ice Brand in the game said the Sword of Mim, which is one of the petty dwarves. So that's another reference they made specifically to the children of Húrin. I have been tempted to get that, but I would just have to find the time to actually play it, There was the Dark Blade. Let's see. Glamdring. How could I forget about that? They called that one Glamdring, which was Foe Hammer. That was King Turgon's sword. Narsil is in there, except it's spelled wrong. It's spelled Marcel. Alternate Universe Dark Souls translation, Feanor's Key. Hey, you never know, right? You never know. The people that make the Dark Souls games, I could tell that they like Tolkien, even though they don't put direct references in. Yeah, they made a game called Elden Ring, and when I saw the trailer for it, I said, I could see that they're kind of doing like, what if they could make a Silmarillion game? They can't. They're not allowed to, but I could tell that that's what they were kind of going for, Oh, and there's an Orcrist as well. So, one of these days, I think maybe, and I'm not talking about sometime soon necessarily, but we could maybe do a playthrough of Castlevania specifically just to point out all of the Tolkien stuff in it, Hold on one moment, guys. But yeah, we're about to end. Let me just look at something here. Okay. Walter, since we were talking about swords, I have a question. What happened to Eol sword? Angurel? Okay, so I think you might have spelled something wrong. Are you talking about Eorl? The first king of Rohan? Is that who we're talking about? Is that what the question is? Oh, or wait, no, I think I know what you're talking about. Are you talking about Eol the Dark Elf? EOL? Yeah, you're talking about Anguriel. Is that the sword you're talking about, Anguriel? Oh, the Game Boy 2 Towers. I've played a little bit of that. You meant Eol the Dark Elf in this. Okay, so let's see. He gave that to Thingol. We know that. And Maeglin wound up with it. And Maeglin left, and we don't really know what became of that sword. But my guess is that he gave it to Morgoth. That would be my guess. Because he wound up being seduced by Morgoth, who told him, that he could have the Princess of Gondolin if he joined him. She was already married, but a guy like this, he didn't care much. That was his cousin that he was in love with. She's like, ew, gross. She married, Tur, of course. But yeah, my guess is that wound up, in Angband at some point, and it's probably long gone. You know what I mean? When Beleriand sank, I don't think anybody went down there to save it. They never mentioned the sword after Maeglin stole it. So that would be my best guess there. Anyway, guys, thank you all for coming by. We had a great time. I know we only got through one chapter, but we got to talk about a lot of really cool lore. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you're watching me on Twitch, follow if you haven't. I stream every day, a lot of gaming stuff. Tomorrow I'm going to be playing Final Fantasy for the After Years in the afternoon. And if you're watching me on Twitch, just hang tight because we're going to do a raid. If you're watching me on YouTube, I mean, it could be. Yeah, he would say the ring's down there, right? He did say that. Although it would be the other sea. He said the ring was in the southern sea. The sword would be where Beleriand was, which was to the west. Yep. Yes, I will do that. And by the way, guys, if you're not subscribed to me on YouTube and you're enjoying what you hear, subscribe to me. We're going to be doing at least 1 or 2 videos a week, trying to stream almost every Thursday here. The next stream for YouTube will be next week on the 21st. Next Thursday, we'll be playing that PlayStation 2 game, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, where we're picking up where we left off in the Barrow Downs, which is actually considered part of the whole Old Forest level. And then in 3 weeks, on the 4th, we'll be back here for the Council of Tolkien with Matt and Sid. And then the next one after that will be the next week. The 11th, we'll be back to read more of the Two Towers. So we'll be continuing along with that. And like I said, if you're watching me on YouTube, also consider membership. Membership helps me out. We have a few channel members in the chat right now. You can see, if you scroll up, you could see Chewie's name, and you can see William Stone there. Notice that little red icon that they have. That's Gandalf's rune. That Coyote has one with a little moon on it. William Stone has one with a star that represents the sun for being a channel member for a whole year. Being a channel member is really cheap. It only costs $5 a month. You get to see all the videos early, which is really cool. As a matter of fact, right after I stop this video, this live stream, it's going to go into members only mode for a little while. So, it'll be like 2 weeks, and then everybody else will be able to watch it. We have to make membership somewhat worth it. You get some emotes and stuff. It's really cool. Thank you, everybody, for coming by. Thank you to Chewy again for the tip. Let's see. So let's go ahead and raid somebody. We'll raid out on Twitch. If you're watching on YouTube, the stream will just end. So I will be saying goodbye to everybody. Who are we going to raid? I think, let's see who's online right now. There's a lot of people online. You know what? A lot of times on Tolkien streams, I wind up raiding Amethyst. And why not do that? She's playing Horizon Zero Dawn, which the last time I was hanging out with her, she was really having fun with that. Oh, of course she's on intermission. We have to raid her if she's on intermission. That always works out, right? I always seem to catch her when she's away, and it's sort of become like a joke at this point. All right, guys. Let me give you guys a raid message for those of you watching on Twitch. This is a very dumb raid message that I'm putting there. Thank you for the follow there. I see you there. Okay, for those of you on Twitch, copy that, paste it as we head into Amethyst stream. For those of you on YouTube, I will seek you out next time. Oh, I'm not even on the right screen. At the Grey Havens. I should have been here the whole time. Here we go. Until next time.